All right. Hold on, Fraser. I'm going to show people what I'm eating. Let me invite people. Hey, how's it going tonight? I'm just going to invite a few people here. Invite. Hey, everybody, I'm just doing some invites. Hopefully you'll do the same. If you hold down the front of the screen for a half a second, it'll pull up your friends. So that's what I'm doing. I'm inviting everybody. I even like to invite people who disagree with me, especially actually. Invite. Damn, I have a lot of people on my list. Okay, that's all. Thank you for sharing the live, Salem Amar. Appreciate it. I made that, I don't know if I ever told you this dessert that I make. It's bananas with black cherries. It's really good. I kind of have to nibble on it though. It's going to get warm. Hey, happy Friday. Good stuff. Hi, Sheila. How you doing? Do me a favor, everybody. Look, I shaved my head too, if you can't tell. I got attacked by a lawnmower, actually. But no, please just tap on my head. I know some people are doing the liking, thank you. And then just share it with your friends, please. They're really limiting my reach. My videos are getting it's really sad what they're doing. It's unfortunate, but it is what it is. Thank you. Thank you, Hannah. Yeah, well, that's just life in the big city, right? But it's disappointing that they're doing that stuff. By the way, I think on Friday night, there's got to be like 6 or 7 people that do these lives. So maybe I'll start to skip Friday nights because it might be better just to do the other nights because, there's so many good people to see. You don't want to overlap as much as you don't want. I don't want to overlap with good content creators. I think Eric Warsaw is still doing his evening thing, I guess. Thank you for liking the live, Hannah. I appreciate that. So, yeah, we got a few things to talk about tonight. I do have a topic that's a little bit off the beaten path. I hope people are willing to talk about it a little bit. Oh, thank you, Bean. Yeah, I'm glad you like the lives. That's great. I appreciate that. Is Mogvet here? Or no, maybe he's not here. Maybe that's the invitation link. I don't know his first name. I don't remember his first name, but he was a great guest. I think people really enjoyed it. I have this you get something really small like a piece of metal or something under your skin. It just hurts like hell. It starts to swell up. So tonight I have to soak this in water and try to get rid of that. Thank you for the nice words. I appreciate that. This is a chocolate cherry, like an ice cream. But it's made with bananas. So if you haven't tried this yet, if you have a high-speed blender, I'm telling you, you're going to love this. Somebody turned me onto this, and I just absolutely love it. So I have a Vitamix. If you know what that is, it's like a really expensive blender. And so you take a bunch of bananas, maybe like 1.5 to 2 bananas that are chopped up, that are frozen, throw them in the blender, grab a handful or two of whatever fruit you like, pineapples, or I have cherries in this one, and I add a little cocoa powder. And then I used unsweetened almond milk for my one. And that just makes this cream. You mix it up and it makes this, like, whatever you want to call this, like this ice cream type stuff. And it tastes a lot like ice cream, but it doesn't have anywhere near the calories. So I don't know about you. I love frozen desserts, but the calories in ice cream is crazy. So that's why I try to eat that as much as I can. And trust me, I can eat junk like anybody. I love cookies and I love all that stuff, right? So my sweet tooth is ever present. And this does a pretty good job. It's fruit, right? So it's not as sweet as refined sugar. Nothing tastes like ice cream, let's face it. There is no substitute for good old ice cream. But the love handles are not loving it. Good stuff. Yeah, somebody says Brenda says, I'm a junk food vegan. You can be a vegan and be very unhealthy. Now, I'm not saying that Brenda is, but I visited some people, and I stopped by this place in Norfolk, Virginia. It's called People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, or PETA. I'm sure you've heard of it. Just to check it out. I'd never been down to their headquarters. And most of the people there were vegan, obviously, because they're animal rights. But holy smokes, man, they were eating like deep fried Snicker bars and stuff like that. I'm like, what are you people doing? Just garbage. and a lot of them are really overweight. I'm like, why do you can be a vegan and actually eat some healthy food once in a while. But I'm sure you've heard of the Impossible Burgers and the Beyond Meat. That stuff's all made out of factory. It's all a bunch of processed foods, oils. It's basically not good for you. What news do I have to tell? Well, I'm not a big news guy, if you haven't noticed. I watched the Putin interview. For those of you who haven't seen that yet, I'm going to talk about that a little bit tonight. I talked about it a little bit last night. So A3 Anon, JMJ, there are plenty of really good news people on the internet. So I tend to try to catch as much of the news as I can, but I'm by no means a news reporter. So if you're here for the up-to-date news, I'm probably not your guy. I do a lot of evaluation, and when I can pick it up, a lot of people here share stuff with me. I'm going to get on my computer in a minute and take a look around. Some nights I have more times than others to prepare. Today was just real busy. I took the dog out for a bit. And I was actually on some other people's lives too. I try to support the smaller content creators because usually when I go to their lives, it brings a few people over, then more people follow them. And so I did that for about an hour and a half today as best I could. So I think that's a good thing to do. A lot of people don't have a lot of followers. There's some really good people on here. I mean, really good. And yet they only have a couple hundred, maybe like 1,200 followers or something. They deserve a lot more. So in the end, it's not about any one of us. It's about the messaging. Yeah, banana-based ice cream, especially, I don't know if you like pina colada stuff, but if you make it with pineapple, it tastes like a pina colada. It's unbelievable. It's like, and let's face it, some of these fruits have what is called a high glycemic index, so bananas, pineapple. It's not like, this is not like a total health food, but it's better than eating real ice cream is what I'm trying to say. Yeah, I heard that. Yeah, this is what's in the talk. So for those you don't know, unfortunately, Netanyahu has announced an initiative where they're going to take all of their forces into Rafah, which is where everybody is right now. They're all displaced. They're all living in tents or whatever, and they're coming in full force. I don't know how much they're going to drop in terms of the the aerial munitions. Yeah, obviously. Someone saying, I wish that Tucker Carlson had asked Vladimir Putin some questions about the conflict in Israel-Palestine. He probably didn't want to get into it, is my guess, because it doesn't do him any good to take a position on that. Think about it. What's the upside for him? Nothing. It's only going to get people pissed off if he says something that's... So by the way, he's an extremely shrewd guy. That's the best word I can use to describe him. He is smart. And he's also very measured. And he's very even-keeled is the best way my understanding of him. He doesn't have these like rage fits. He doesn't get too high, too low. He's just a straightforward kind of guy. Some, even a little bit boring. I don't know if you watched the first half of the interview, but it was pretty boring. He talked about the history of the Russian Empire, but he wanted people to share a historical understanding to frame why he comes at it the way he does. So it's important to know, this is the big thing I want to tell people, is that all of the invasions of Russia historically have come through Ukraine. That's the thing. He didn't even say that. He should have said that. But my point is, I don't think he's at all the horrible guy that everybody, that we're kind of taught to believe. I'm not saying he's perfect. I mean, I know what he did in Chechnya was rather brutal. And I think he does what he does to stay in power and control what's important to him. I have no doubt about that. So a lot, who knows what happens behind the scenes, but that happens a lot. I mean, look at the United States. We've had presidents that have been assassinated, right? We've had people literally unalive the person that's in the way of their agenda. And trust me, the other presidents got the message. I mean, they don't have to do that twice. Yeah, I mean, for those who don't know, during his speech, someone mentioned that Putin's words about American propaganda were great. And I agree. Listen, he knows what's going on. The rest of the world usually knows what's going on. The Americans are usually the last people to know. I was just on somebody's live. It was made up of mostly Palestinians, but an American came on there named Gladiator. And I wish he would come on here so we could talk. But he said he'd visited Israel before, but he didn't seem to have a clue as to what really goes on in the West Bank and Gaza. And I think a lot of people have this just warped view of what really goes on there, or they don't even know what goes on there. And if they do know what goes on and they still don't care, then they're like a sociopath, and I certainly don't want to be around people like that. Somebody says, do a better job. Well, you can do a better job too, man. Come up with a better comment than that, right? There you go. Nice having you on here. We'll just keep things quiet on that front for the rest of this. But thank you for being here. So you can listen in. We won't have to worry about any more of those comments. stuff like that. But, I think that, this is the thing that Americans don't understand about him. He went out of his way to try to work out some sort of peace before all this happened. And I mean really out of his way. And he waited forever to help the people in the eastern part of Ukraine who were screaming for help. And he said no. He didn't want to get involved in the conflict with the with the West. He knew what the cost would be, not only financially, but of course to his people, right? And the last thing you want to do as a leader is to upset the apple cart of your leadership, right, through going to war unnecessarily. Because, you got people's sons and daughters that go there, mostly sons that go there and they die. So the U.S., if you don't know, the U.S. caused all of this. And I mean all of it. They were behind every little incremental thing that caused this to be forced the Russians to do what they did. And I was just surprised they didn't do it sooner. And I said that to my family, and I got, yelled at and told to shut the hell up, and I didn't know what I was talking about. And Vladimir Putin wants to take over the world. He's a crazy dictator. All the MSNBC bullshit you get. So, who is compiling a list of people who have written their names on the droppable munitions that people drop on Gaza? I don't know, but it's an unpleasant list, and I certainly don't like it. I think Chris Pine did it. I don't get it, man. Well, I just said that, Mo Justice. I said what he did in Chechnya was brutal. You're not going to get anybody to defend that. Imagine this. Imagine if Texas right now had a bunch of violent extremists that were willing to use violent force to push back against the United States. And they started to act on it and said they're going to secede and they want to have freedom. Do you think the U.S. government would treat them with kid gloves? They'd go in and crush that thing with everything we have. And that's what Putin did in Chechnya. And it was bad. A lot of people died. But, he has an idea of how he wants his country to be organized and run, and he doesn't allow it to go outside of that. And so that's what he does. I'm not saying the guy's perfect. I listen, strong leaders make strong decisions, and he's made some, and it's always difficult what to do. I mean, what do you think the U.S. government would do if Texas really wanted to secede from the Union? You think they'd let that happen? No way. There'd be a massive military operation to stop that. So I don't think he's especially horrible in that regard, although, of course, whatever happened to the people living there is horrible, obviously. If you're wondering what the hell I'm eating, I talked about it earlier. This is I'll try to show it to you. It's like a cherry ice cream that I made. Probably show it a little better. It's made out of bananas. It's actually really good. But it's melting, so I got to eat it quick. We were talking about Vladimir Putin. For those who just come on. By the way, I don't want to bore anybody. If this is your first time coming to a live, seeing me or whatever, can you please type the number 1 in chat? Because I certainly don't want to give people my background if everybody already knows. Chia pudding's great. I like chia pudding, Nadia. I don't know if there's a vegan version of it. I try to keep as much of my stuff. Hannah, you're not new here, are you? I don't think you are. If you are, thank you. Someone named Zach here. Welcome, Zach. How you doing? Mike James, how you doing? Bob with Onio, if I'm saying that right. I hope I'm not saying that wrong. Spicy Scorpio, that's a cool name. 1.5 MB, that means you've been here once before or came back for more. Ona Zada, no, that's okay, Hannah, that's all good. Somebody said I never welcomed you. I'm sorry, Susanna Hauser, I meant to. I always try to get everybody. I might miss some people. Welcome, thanks for being here. I appreciate it. Somebody says I watched the entire Tucker interview and man, wasted 2+ hours. I admit it was a little bit just like kind of stale. It wasn't very interesting. It didn't have any kind of pizzazz to it. A lot of it was boring in the beginning. I thought it was bad. It got a little better when he talked about like the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. So I don't know. I think what happened, it was about maybe an hour and 20 minutes in, it got okay. But the first hour was tough. I agree. But, Putin's not a very he's not a very snazzy kind of guy. He's real simple. He used to drive a taxi cab in Moscow after he got out of the KGB. He's pretty much a regular dude, He just happens to love Russia, and he does anything he can to protect the country. I have a great video of him. If you don't know this, most people have no idea. But when the West came in to try to take advantage of the transition from state-owned enterprise to privatization, which went on, after 1990, Boris Yeltsin was in. That's where most of the craziness happened. And they took total advantage of them. I don't think the CIA actually did it, cows and sheep. Somebody's asking, do I think the CIA blew up Nord Stream? I don't think the CIA actually like literally came out of their suit and tie and jumped in the water. But to say they orchestrated it, yeah, they coordinated to some extent, I believe. I think that's not a hard stretch to make that allegation. Yeah, the European Union threatened to sanction Tucker Carlson, the journalist who went over and did the interview, which means he wouldn't be able to travel there, which is, absolutely ridiculous. It's free speech, right? If you think the guy says something that's propagandistic, just reply back. It's not a big deal. Yep, if you want to know what happened with Nord Stream, look up Seymour Hersh. Good suggestion, Ekru. By the way, Ekru, just to let you know, I'm pretty sure you're set up as a mod. Somebody keeps complaining that they're getting muted. They sent me a few emails saying, why do I keep getting muted? So it sounds like it's somebody with an Indian name, I'm guessing. But I don't remember their name. Just please be, I like to say, err on the side of letting people talk unless they're saying something absolutely, out of control. And then let them go. Or if they're just being, a complete jackass. Anyway, Sony says for sure 7. So if you see for sure 7, FORSURE 7, just if they're repeating the same question, they're just trying to get noticed. And sometimes I don't look at the comments. Just make sure you don't do all caps. That's usually what the moderators get people for. But anyway, so, Putin said some things that I thought were interesting. He talked about the peace process leading up to the Ukraine war. He talked about the Minsk 1 and 2 accords. So I don't want to get into the entire Ukraine thing, but there was a forcible change of leadership in 2014 where someone who was a little more sympathetic to the Russian side of things, they were negotiating with a thing with the EU as well. So it was this little tug of war that was going on. His name was Viktor Yanukovych. And so Viktor Yanukovych was forced out of office in a semi-violent coup d'etat, which many people have alleged was orchestrated again by the U.S. State Department, the whole U.S. apparatus. And they used the neo-Yazis as sort of the muscle to fire into a protest. This is all what's alleged. I'm not some mastermind who knows everything. I'm just saying this is what I've come to understand. And so basically, the people who saw this happen blamed it on the sitting president. And so he was forced out. Most of the people who are Russian speaking, both in Crimea as well as this area called the Donbass, which is the most eastern part of Ukraine, they didn't want that to happen. I mean, obviously, if you voted somebody, imagine if the Democrats won an election and then Trump takes over, like a year in or 2 years in, right? You'd be like, no, this is bullshit. But that's what happened in Ukraine. So those people were trying to say, no, we're not going to do this. Crimea immediately voted to secede in 2014. You may have heard that Russia took over, they conquered. That's bullshit. There was a referendum that the people in the Crimean Peninsula voted on. Now, some people say it was a sham. I happen to believe it was perfectly legitimate. And then when they voted in favor of seceding and joining the Russian Federation, the Russians added additional troops to protect the citizens from these neo-Yazis who hate Russians. I mean, absolutely hate them. And so from then on, the U.S. has used its position of political, they always get these lackeys in place. They control everything. And they've used that to their ends with terms of arming them as a NATO-compliant force, throwing lots of money in there, using it as a way to launder. It's such a corrupt place. And the poor people from Ukraine aren't involved. The average person has nothing to do with this stuff. But they're stuck in the middle. And then when the conflict broke out, the central government and the Yazis that are in there pushed most of what we saw since 2014. They're sort of these rabid dogs, I guess, for lack of a better term. And they want to go and unalive Russian-speaking in the east of Ukraine. We were told in America it's just Ukraine, right? Just this one contiguous group of people. Not at all. They couldn't have been more different. And so the problem is that over time, the neo-Yazis were throwing artillery into residential areas because they wanted to forcibly make these people comply with the central Ukrainian nationalism. They didn't want them to maintain their identity. It's almost like if the government in the United States went down to West Texas and started dropping, lobbing artillery from Oklahoma into West Texas because the people wouldn't speak English. And imagine how the people in Texas, they'd be calling Mexico, hey, dude, come over here and help us out. We're getting bombed by our government. You're like, no, we don't want to fight. So, but eventually something had to give, right? And again, if you're getting relentlessly unalived, 14, 15,000 of your people over the course of 8 years, you're not too happy about that. So it's always good to put it in context of our country. Anyway, so there was 2 different times that they tried to work something out in Belarus. Minsk is the capital of Belarus. It's called Minsk Accords 1, and then a second time, Minsk Accords 2. And the Ukrainian representatives, as well as the French and the Germans, they came up with written guidelines of how there'd be some autonomy for these people that were basically had their sovereignty stolen out from under them, the elections. And then the Ukrainian Yazis just didn't maintain it. They couldn't be reined in, and they kept firing into there, and they just couldn't stop them. There's a video of Zelensky after Minsk II going out to the field and talking to one of the field commanders from one of these groups and saying, "Hey, I'm the president of Ukraine. You need to listen to what I'm saying." And the guy goes, "What are you talking about?" Like, just ignores him. Just ignores him. So it just goes to show you the power in Ukraine is not in the central government. And plus, let's be real. Zelensky is a creation of the West. He's a total joke. He's an actor that he played a president on TV and then he gets elected president. It's almost like Martin Sheen being elected, right? Well, of course, someone else is controlling his every move. So anyway, that's how it works. That's what America does. They put in patsies, they control them. It meets the U.S. objectives and the Western stuff with military and money. That's what happens. Anyway, so that's the way it is. The United States, this is just the long arm of the U.S. empire playing its same game. So somebody says Z is a good guy. I wholeheartedly disagree. So if you want to make the case for Zelensky being a good guy, I'll go head to head with you any day of the week. We can talk about it. I'll lay out my case. I'll get to you soon for backup. I see you. I usually go till about 30 minutes, but I bring guests on, so thanks for your patience. So anyway, this is where it's all led. So Putin emphasized in the interview, basically, obviously, he talked a lot about that. He mentioned the fact that he tried for peace. He realizes people didn't really want peace because after a while, you hear what somebody says, but they do something else like 3 or 4 times. You're like, okay, I got it. And so he pretty much said, okay. And so they decided they were going to work on some technology, and they now have some missile systems that the U.S. can't stop. And they did that. Well, somebody's asking, why did Putin bomb? Why did they go after Kiev? The reason why they went in initially to try to get Kiev when they attacked was it would be much easier for command and control to disable the central authority in Ukraine as far as prosecuting the war and all the stuff they thought the U.S. was going to come in. They tried to do it, but the attack failed. And so rather than trying to beat on that drum, they moved back and they reinforced their positions in the east. So trust me, Zelensky's not a good guy. Not a good guy. They've shut down all opposition parties in Ukraine. They've closed and attacked a bunch of Christian Orthodox churches that were pushing back against all the stuff they're doing. There's no democracy in Ukraine, and the U.S. is paying for all of its civil servants and administrative apparatus. We're paying for everything. So we're basically paying the salaries and the retirements and everything, and we're paying for everything, which is crazy. And why? Why? All because of the fact that our country wants to establish a bulkhead on the door of Russia, put missiles in, and have our lackeys get back in if they can destabilize and get rid of Putin. They want to divvy up Russia and take all their shit. And disable an adversary, right? They're a nuclear armed adversary, right? You don't want that. So it's just a win-win-win if the Americans can have that happen. But, when the Americans are meddling, you got to remember, now they're aligned with other countries. They're aligned with Iran. They're aligned with China. That's a big hornet's nest to kick over, right? So I think with the BRICS nations and the currency stuff, we're seeing a big shift. They mentioned that in the interview too. And he thinks it was irresponsible. He mentioned this. I don't know if you know this. The U.S. uses its dollar, the fact that it has a dollar as a reserve currency, as a weapon for cutting people off to settlements through SWIFT, which is the international finance system to settle transactions in dollars. And the U.S. put major sanctions on Russia, and they stole some of their foreign reserves. And I think what Putin said was that was very ill-advised for them to use that as a weapon, because now other countries are trying to, get rid of their dollar reserves and move away from the U.S. and the dollar system. And that just further accelerates the problems that we're going to experience as residents here. You'll wait and see. But I'm not a Russian sympathizer, G2. I'm an analyst. So I'm just telling you what happened. And I'm only critical of Ukraine so much as, I feel badly about the citizens and all the people that had to move and flee from because of the conflict. Just like I have a lot of sympathy with what happened on October 7th in Israel and all the families that were affected, the hostages that were taken, the people that were unalive or whatever. I feel the same thing. But the name, by the way, the name calling in all caps G2, just, give it a rest. If you want to come up and talk, let's talk. I'm happy to talk with you about it. If you want to have a conversation, let's talk. But the reason I analyze it the way I do is because of what the U.S. did. It was the U.S.'s role. Ukraine is being used as a proxy to do this. All right, G2, I gave you some chances there. We're going to have to send you a packing. Have a nice night. So, the bottom line is the U.S. has used Ukraine as a proxy, and about 550,000, maybe, I don't know, a little less, a little more, Ukrainians are gone now because of this. And, I don't think the U.S. leadership seems to care too much. They just want to send more weapons in and keep pursuing the strategic goals of the United States at the expense of the Ukrainian people, and the country's destroyed, let's face it. Their economy's dead. The Russians they've annexed, probably about 15%, 20% of their territory to the east. And, this is a strategic loss for the United States. Let's face it. No amount of money and weapons is going to change the situation that's where it is now. None. None at all. Now, I'm not a Putin fanboy. I'm really not. I mean, I'm acknowledging the things that he does well, and I'm acknowledging the things that he's done that have been bad, right? That's fair. But I do think he's a more effective leader than any of the ones in the West. The Western leaders, I think, are just terrible, including our people that are in the State Department. Let's face it. And I don't even think they're really running the show. They're the placeholders, right? But I think that if you look at what the Russians really want to do versus what the Americans are trying to do, I mean, if you're for America for what they're doing over what the Russians are doing, I think you're not being fair. Because the Russians aren't out there meddling in everybody else's business 24/7, 365. They want to have reasonable trade. They want to have positive relations. I mean, just wait till I talk to Diane Sare about this, who's the Senate candidate for New York that I'm supporting. This is how she feels. She understands that the other countries don't want to have a war. They don't want to go to war with the United States or the West. Nobody wins in that, right? It's just carnage. But the U.S. keeps pushing. It's what it calls the rules-based international order. And what that means is the U.S. makes the rules, and everyone's got to follow the U.S.'s orders. That's the system that the U.S. wants. And if anybody pushes against that, they're considered, a radical or a renegade or something like that. Well, yeah, I agree with that. Whenever there's a foreign leader, just so you know, this is how the U.S. playbook works. If you have a foreign leader that won't play ball, won't become a paid lackey for the U.S., won't allow the corporate people to come in and do their thing, won't allow the military bases to come in, or won't cooperate with the U.S. military alliance, they're considered an enemy. And therefore, they're vilified ruthlessly in the media, and there's all sorts of efforts made to destabilize their local political situation to try to foment unrest that way. And that usually doesn't work in many cases. So then they go to step 2 and step 3 until they can get rid of somebody, if they can. In certain places, they can't. And that's why they continue to vilify this guy. But believe it or not, I have this video, and this is just to point out what he's done. You can argue one way or the other whether you like him or hate him. But there's a video of him going into a town where there's a lot of factories that are about to be closed down because business owners, if you don't know, private business seems to care less about the workers, right? We know that in America, a lot of stuff went to Mexico, then it went to China and elsewhere. So a lot of our manufacturing jobs are gone. And that hurts the population, right? You used to work for, a salary. Your wife could stay home with the kids and you could pay your bills, right? That was a good, decent job with benefits and a pension, right? Well, what the corporate people were doing inside of Russia was they were getting rid of all that. The people that used to work for state industry had some of those basic protections. And of course, when that was privatized, that stuff started to crumble. And so there's a video of Putin going into a town where there's a bunch of factory owners. He brings all the leaders in from this region. They sit at a table, and he stands at the top, and he goes, "You're all going to sign this piece of paper saying you're not going to close down these factories. There's 30,000 people whose lives depend on these things being here. You're not going to outsource it." And one guy says he signed it, but he didn't. And Putin calls him out. He's like the wealthiest guy in the room. He comes over and begrudgingly signs this thing, and there Putin goes, "Good." And he walks out. Now, can you imagine an American or Western leader making rich people do something to help workers? That's unheard of, right? Everything in our country supports the wealthy class. And if something shuts down, oh well. Oh well. So there you go. That's the difference. And listen, I'm not saying he's a cupcake. He's not perfect. But he was willing to stand up for some of his people. I think that's better than what we got. I think he's more reasonable and more measured. And I think he's more patient. He's more disciplined. He's more, I hate to use the word decent, but I think in terms of the things he works for and not willing to accept, I think he's a more decent human being, although you can argue about a lot of the things he's done that's indecent. But anyway, so I think in terms of peace, he's a way better person to have in charge than someone like different, because it's not even the people in charge here. It's the mission of the whole system as far as what it wants to take. Yeah, if you've ever, I mean, just watch some documentaries about the guy or listen to some of his speeches. I mean, the one he gave with the interview with Tucker Carlson, I thought was very bland. He's had much better conversations with Oliver Stone. If you watch what's called the Putin interviews, which was on Showtime, and now I think you can buy it for 12 or 15 bucks. And somebody's mentioning Navalny. Remember that I told you the American government tries to fuel opposition candidates to try to stir up support to unseat certain people or to push back against the leader they don't want. Navalny's a creature of that. That's all he is. He's an invention of the resistance the Americans wanted to force. Good looking guy, good speaker, but he did some stupid stuff. He got in trouble for it. And now he's behind bars. And I think that you have to calculate very well in certain countries what you do politically and what you say and how you do them, because it's not like here where you can kind of just say your mind and then there's no direct consequences, at least not legally. What somebody's here saying, Hannah says, what's happening in Gaza is way worse than Afghanistan and Iraq. I never thought I'd say that. Well, these things are terrible to compare because they're all horrific, right? And I guess numbers play a role somewhere in that. I don't know how you want to compare it that way. There's no way of saying just this or just that, right? Or this is, in terms of horrific nature of it, in terms of the degree of, whatever you want to call it, depravity of the Americans versus what the Israelis are doing. I think they're all just as bad. I think the Americans actually have unalived far more people and have a much more callous disregard for the lives of people who live in these, less developed nations. They just don't care. It seems like they say they do, but they don't. And then look what the Israelis are saying. We go out of our way to make sure. Come on, you don't go out of any way. You just drop stuff, and whatever happens, happens. And I've been criticized for what I'm about to say, but I'm going to say it because it's what I believe. And I could be wrong, and maybe my position on this will change. But I really don't believe that there's a desire among the Israelis to literally unalive as all the Palestinian people. There may be some psychos, like in any group, that just wants to go after another because they have a hatred towards them. But it is true that if they wanted to do more damage, they have the capability to do it. I mean, it's horrible what they've done, obviously, in dropping this, that, and the other, the way they've done it. But it's not been like every 5 seconds something comes down, and they have the munitions to do it. So I'm not giving them credit for not doing that. Don't get me wrong. I'm simply saying they have the military power to be a lot worse than they have been. And I think if the mission was to unalive more people, they would have been worse than they've been. But it doesn't make it any better. One person being intentionally or cavalierly unalived is one too many. And if you add the numbers together where they are now, it's horrific. It meets the level of a G-side. So that's why we're seeing actions taken at the ICJ. I don't use it, but I believe that the number one objective of this whole thing is, and you can argue what happened. I was talking about this earlier. I'm not sure what happened on 10/7 and who, how, where, when, and whatever. I have a lot of questions, and a lot of people do. But I think what they want, it seems like, is they want the land. And this has always been about land. Let's face it. They want the people off the land as best they can do it. And the problem is they have this two pesky things going on. They have people that are so resolute with their faith and their identity tied to the land, they're never going to move voluntarily. It seems like it. And then you have the H group, which is willing to fight to the death to protect it. Not like the West Bank where they sort of acquiesce and work in this weaker power sharing, BS. It's like a hornet's nest. They're like the yellow jackets that won't stop coming if you rattle them, right? That's what I kind of look at the H group. And I'm not trying to justify anything they do. I mean, listen, if I was Israeli and what happened on the 7th, I'd be right pissed, especially if somebody I knew got harmed or was taken hostage. I'd be livid. So I understand that point of view. And the hard part for people in those situations is to see the broader context, because they really don't care. Who cares? Nothing justifies this, what they say. I don't know. I have mixed feelings because I don't want to see anybody get hurt. And at the same time, I don't want to see anybody under someone else's oppression indefinitely with no ability to try to change it, because that's not fair to them. I mean, if it was, like I said, if the script was flipped. So somebody's asking me who the hell I am, so I'm just going to say it really quickly just to get it out of the way. So if you're new, my name is Chip Barnes. I'm somebody who was in the Army, so I'm a veteran. I was in a tank unit during the first Gulf War, which is in 1990, in the Iraqi desert. And I graduated college in 1989. Just before that happened, I was deployed to Germany before we left to go to the Persian Gulf. Luckily, nobody in our unit died, but a lot of us came back with all these weird symptoms of, all this different stuff. We got, all this stuff was around us, all these fire, all this bad stuff, right? It was like a toxic soup. So I'm now unfortunately suffering a lot of the long-term consequences, but it is what it is. Anyway, just before I left college to go to the Persian Gulf and be in the Army, I got introduced to this Israel-Palestine conflict because I didn't know anything. Most Americans don't know anything. I didn't either. And I learned some things from a classmate's senior presentation about the first Intifada. I just had no clue. I didn't know there was a Gaza Strip or a West Bank. I didn't know any of this stuff. And so when I learned all that, and I learned about the 1967 war, it really shook me up. I didn't know what the Nakba was. All this stuff became clear to me, like, this is really unfair. This is not what I was told. And so since then, I've just, I'm not some scholar. I've not studied it to the point like people who have PhDs, but it's just something that's been an interest of mine because I just thought it was really unfair. And I've been criticized for focusing on this more than other things. Like, why are you so focused on this? Do you hate people? No, it's just something I happen to know more about. And it was just something I was following. And so I can speak to it better. But the more I learn about other stuff like Ukraine, I'll talk about those things too. This is on a lot of people's radar because it's literally coming through on their screens and they're all pissed off about it, right? So that's why we're talking about it. So again, I'm somebody who became aware of it just out of pure chance. And so I've read a lot of books. I've seen a ton of debates and video and podcasts and all this stuff like that. And I happen to see it differently than other people see it. I see it from the point of view that I believe that Palestinians, through no fault of their own, lost a bunch of their land. It does happen elsewhere, agreed. But my point of view is it shouldn't have happened. It was unfair to them. I know life isn't always fair, but what's happened since then is what I really take issue with. More so. The beginning was bad, and obviously the formation of the State of Israel was a gift to some and a nightmare for others, right? Fair enough. But, yeah, sure. But I think what's happened since is hard to argue from the Israeli perspective. They say it's based on security for the most part. No. You don't need to spray sewage water on people's homes in East Jerusalem for security. That's not security. That's just blatant mistreating people for no reason. You don't have to have 957,000, I'm exaggerating, checkpoints to control security. You're doing it because you can, and you're trying to make people's lives difficult, and you're doing a good job of it, by the way. And you demolish homes like champions. You don't give permits out, so people, if they want to build, they have to take the risk to do it, and then you knock it down. And then they don't have a home. They're homeless. Right? There's pouring cement into water wells. There's cutting water lines. There's destroying olive tree groves. Rolling barrel bombs down the hill from higher ground settlements to destroy people's homes and their crops and whatever else. The list of unnecessary things that are done by the Israelis and the settlers in the occupied territories is endless. So if you want to watch that, listen, this is not me making stuff up. You can see documentaries that literally are people who are there documenting it in real time. And you can watch Life in Occupied Palestine. I think if most Americans and most people who support Israel around the world watch that documentary, it would change how they think. You can't be a good person and watch that and ignore it. Because that makes you a horrible person. Because if you don't care how someone else is being immiserated, unalived, and mistreated by somebody else, just because they can, because they have more weapons and a bigger army, and the people can't resist you, if that's what you're about, you're not a good person. Even if your team is the one that's doing it, right? You got to stand up and basically speak truth to power. And there are a lot of people that just don't know, in fairness. So not knowing is understandable, but not being willing to learn is not okay. And the problem is that a lot of people who are on here, they look at it from a very one-sided point of view. I understand the Israeli point of view because I've interacted with a lot of people who speak about the issue. And I understand their point of view. I don't have the same emotional ties because my family didn't go through the H-cost. I haven't been dealing with rocket fire. I haven't had to deal with the incursions that have taken place both under the PLO back in the day, and then the separation barrier was built. That stopped for the most part. And then what's happened with Gaza right now. I've not lived that experience, so I can't say for sure how I'd feel if I did. But I do think it doesn't look at the totality of it from both sides. It's like Ben Shapiro is a great example. He sees this exclusively from one vantage point, just completely delegitimizes, and just nothing else exists, right? So we talked about that a minute ago. Someone's asking, JD24 asking, what about the ground invasion that Netanyahu talked about? Yeah, it's going to come. He's threatening to invade Rafah, which is the southern slice of the Gaza Strip that goes up to the border. And they've already gone through Khan Yunis, right? So now they're moving into Rafah. And that's where most of the tunnels are, by the way, because of course what happens with the commerce under, with the Egyptian border, a lot of the stuff that comes in is done through Rafah. So the H group has a huge advantage. So if the Israeli troops do go in there, which looks like they're going to lose a lot of soldiers. They're just that's just the way it is. It's not that they're bad, like pathetic, although some of the reserves that are there are not, I don't think they're really properly equipped to fight in that type of war. They're more like, kids just hanging out having fun, and they're in the army. And that's not the kind of person you want in the army, just because people have mandatory service. They think they're good, but they're nowhere near as good as the H group. However, somebody says, hey, what happened to that punk lawyer who was trying to sue me? His name was Robert what's his name? McGallen? Anyway, who cares? Let him go do his thing. He's a guy from Waco, Texas. Robert McCallum, is that his name? Anyway, I'll find it. Whatever it is, let him go do his thing. I think he was going to sue me for lying or something like that. How can you sue somebody for lying? Anyway, he called me the devil. I don't know. He said that I was a serial liar, and he doubted that I ever served in the military. So there you go. Now, it's okay to disagree. I disagree with what people from Israel say all the time. I don't think they're, quote, lying. I think they really believe it. It's just that I think what they believe is not accurate. That's all I'm trying to say. Yeah, Waco, Texas. So anyway, I get his name written down, and who knows, but he certainly went to work on me. And listen, that's, they're trying to disparage somebody who has a clear voice that's in opposition to what they say. So I understand that. You got to have thick skin when it comes to this kind of stuff, or you're not going to last 10 seconds. So it's never fun when you have bumps and bruises along the way of your life, but get back up, brush yourself off, and keep going as best you can. That's all there is to it. So let me see if I have any guests in the queue. I think I talked my way out of a guest waiting here. Yeah, sorry about that. If you had to wait. So I'll try to access. Oh, hi, Interactive Brian. How you doing? Hey, yeah, hey there. Why is BlackRock in Gaza? I didn't know BlackRock was in Gaza, so I can't answer that. I'd have to look it up and find out. Yeah, that's the other thing you'll find out for those who are new. And this is just because, I don't know a lot of stuff. I know some things, but my ego and my identity is not married to my beliefs or what I know or don't know. So if I get something wrong, hey, tell me, I'll fix it. And then if I have the wrong take and someone shows me a different take that makes more sense, I'll go with that. It's all about just being flexible. Having said that, and I don't want to be insensitive to the things that may have happened to Israelis on the 7th, because why would you be? One of the challenges I've had over the years is watching how the Israeli government operates with regards to its spokespeople, the IDF, the government. And there's a pattern that I've observed that they don't tell the truth very much. And they're always being called out or caught in lies, and they just kind of pretend it didn't happen and move on. There's been plenty of examples of that. There's been cases where they go into the Al-Shifa hospital and they put some stuff behind an MRI machine and then claim it was the H group with a little go bag. And then they mess up the camera and stuff. They make mistakes that easily makes it debunkable, including have a laptop that had a connection that only works in Israel. Why would an H group have a power pack on a notebook that doesn't work in their territory, right? Doesn't make sense. So I've just seen it over and over again. And listen, I don't have any reason to deny the allegations of the more atrocious things that happened on 10/7. I just don't know. I don't know how much the military did. I don't know how much the H group did. I don't know how much anybody did. But we're seeming getting more evidence that it wasn't as simple as we were initially told, right? We were told it was, oh my God, 1,400 people, how out? And then we found out, well, maybe it was 1,200. Oh, no, well, maybe it was 1,047. Okay, we're not really sure what happened at the rave party because now the troops came in. We're not sure about helicopters, whatever. We're not clear about that. We're not clear about tanks being in the kibbutzim. We're not clear about that. We know some things happened, right? I've seen video of some things happen, so I know some things happened because I saw it. But a lot of the photographs are after the fact. It's making a lot of assumptions as to who, what, where, when, and how, saying, well, that's evidence. Well, yeah, it's evidence that somebody's no longer alive, but it doesn't show how or what happened to them before they came that way. You're like, well, come on. Again, same thing with women. There's claims that women were SA'd. I hope that didn't happen, but they're claiming it did. As far as I know, there's been no medical inquiries, and the families that were, told that their person went through this, they're saying it didn't happen. So there's more evidence. I don't know for sure. I can't deny what happened, but I can't confirm it. So therefore, it's irresponsible for me to say either or. And I've been told I deny it. I don't deny it. I just can't confirm it. So I've been asked multiple times to go look at websites, go look at Telegram groups, which I've done. I've gone through the whole damn thing. It took me like an hour and a half to go through all the posts. I didn't see one post that proved the things that we're talking about right now. And I listen, not that I want to see it, it's disgusting, but I wish I had some information so I wouldn't be in this middle place. I could say, okay, yes, this is definitive. But it's not fair to ask somebody just to take their word for it when they have a history of lying. It's like the boy who cried wolf, right? I mean, why would you believe somebody if they've lied to you 1,000 times? Why would you believe the 1,001 is actually the truth, right? It's hard to do. It's not that I have anything against the people. It's just that's their pattern of behavior. So he says, what's wrong with your setting? I don't know what you mean. You're talking about where I live, yellow wall, my face, whatever. Yeah, so Max Blumenthal from the Gray Zone. I like Max a lot. Actually, I saw Max do a comedy show a while back, which I thought was fun. He's really good, by the way, for someone who's been barely in the comedy scene. It was amazing. I was really surprised at how good he was. And of course, Jimmy Dore was the main. I saw Jimmy Dore. If you don't know Jimmy, I met Max at the comedy show, and then I met Jimmy at the Ukraine peace rally a while back, briefly. I mean, I certainly don't know these guys well. I just met them briefly. I'm a fan. I like both of them. Anyway, yeah, I try to be. And again, for those of you who are new, my whole shtick is basically when I do have guests on, you'll see this if you stick around. But I try to be as fair as I can. I'm not going to get everything right. It's okay. And, I'm going to blow some things. But I try to be fair, try to look at both sides, try to be polite about it. I don't make definitive statements that I know something unless I have absolute concrete evidence. Like, for example, in terms of the buildings that have been hit, the residential structures in Gaza, I know for a fact that the Israelis have not dropped leaflets, and have not done what they call a soft tap, which is to drop something real small on the roof to kind of give people a heads up. In many or most of the instances in Gaza, as they claim they do. They claim they do it as a practice. They don't. I have video of journalists that are on the buildings about 5 blocks away that are just kind of checking shit out, and all of a sudden, kaboom, a missile or a bomb comes down, and the thing's gone. Multiple buildings sometimes. No notice, no soft tap, no nada. So to claim to the contrary that this is a pervasive practice of the Israeli, it's just not true. And I have video proof to debunk that. Now, if I didn't have proof of that, I wouldn't say it. Now, all the journalists that have unalived, you think that's accidental? You think they just kind of were in the wrong place at the wrong time? No. This is standard practice of the Israelis. More journalists have died in this first few months than in the entire year, or even some entire conflicts like World War II. More have died here than the entirety of World War II. It doesn't make any sense. So obviously there's some stuff going on. And then you have to ask the question of, what really happened on the 7th, right? I put this question out when I first started on TikTok about a week into it. I was like, who benefits from this, right? Was there a reason this happened? More so than just it happening by pure chance. And I heard stories from Israeli guards who used to be in the IDF, and they worked on the Gaza border. And they explained exactly how it's guarded, exactly how things work. And they said there's absolutely no way this would have happened unnoticed. There's no way. So, I've heard other explanations for it that I'm not going to get into here because I'll get banned. Because it's, they call it misinformation. If you posit other ideas about how things went down other than what's reported in the news. So I'm not going to go there. What I'm going to do is go sit down because my neck is starting to hurt me. Let me put on the light in here and turn off this one. There we go. Let me turn off the kitchen light in here. Okay. Thanks for the pause. Appreciate it. Now, just as a quick break until we go to the next conversation point, I want to let people know that I do these lives 6 days a week and at least 2 hours. Sometimes I go as many as 6 hours on the lives. But the normal schedule, it's pinned in my main video page. It's Monday, Wednesday, Friday from 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. Eastern Time. And then Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays, I go from 12 noon until about 2 p.m. On Saturdays, I usually go a little longer because I have time that I do it. And then sometimes I do some impromptu ones on Sundays or whenever, sometimes during the day on the Monday, Wednesday, Friday. If something's going on or if something's in my mind, I just got to get out. Good night, Brian. Thanks for being here. Am I experiencing censorship, Lomo? Yeah, unfortunately. The way it works on TikTok, if you haven't known, is they have an algorithm, right? It kind of figures out what's going to go into your what's called your For You page, FYP, and that's whatever you're doing when you're just scrolling through. It's all that stuff. And so what happens is they don't show that to a lot of people. They kind of limit your reach, and then you have your what's called friends page or followers page, which is another group of people who follow you. And normally it's supposed to go to all them and then new people as the algorithm directs it. But I've had people who are supposed to be notified of my lives and they're not being notified. And they're like, hey, why didn't I get your notice? I'm like, So there's that. And then of course I've had videos taken down. In fact, before the night's up, I'll show you the photographs of the most recent. So a video was taken down. It was just a stupid video about definitions of a term, and then I appealed it. It came back up like a day later, same day, like an hour after I appealed. Like, so we've reviewed your video. It doesn't violate the guidelines. Thank you for your patience. Sorry for any hassle. Like, that's what they send you. And then like 2 days later, they took it down again, and there was no way to appeal it. It just got permanently taken down. And the video is very benign. It's like, it says something like this, and I have it in my eye. It's no longer on TikTok, but I have it saved. I save everything. And it says basically like this, we need a new definition. And it turns out that if you're against the mass unaliving of tens of thousands of people and you oppose, a G-side, you're now considered an anti-Semite. So that's the new definition of the word. That got banned. It was only like a 15 or 20 second video. Anyway, who knows? In the past, just to let you know, people probably don't know this, but I've been on TikTok about 3.5 months, I guess. Is that right? Let me think. November, December, January, February. It's coming up on 4 months. So in the first week and a half, I had about 64,000 followers, and then boom, my account got taken down. I was like, what? And so I started over again, did another 2 weeks, about 65,000, boom, came down again. I was like, damn, this is not too much fun. So I did another one, and it lasted 2 days, and then boom, and then one more just for good, just to give it a try, and it lasted 2 hours. And I thought, okay, well, I guess I'm permanently gone from TikTok. And then somehow, some way, like 2 days later, my first account that was way back in the day came back up, which is the one we're on now. So I don't even know why this all happened. I thought it was a joke at first, like someone's pulling my chain here. They told me I was permanently banned, and then all of a sudden, boom, my account comes back. It was like very strange. So, but I think what's happening, if I had to guess, is there's a relationship somehow between parties. I don't know exactly what. And there's some pressure being brought to bear on people who meet a certain set of criteria. I think I probably check certain boxes. And they just don't want to hear it from people like me, right? They want less exposure for people like me because, let's face it, I'm an American, and I'm an older, Army vet who understands this thing pretty well and talks to it pretty openly. And that's not something I think a lot of people want to have. In fact, I've been told by people, you're crazy for doing this. You might be in real danger. I don't know. I mean, I hope not. But I think living through fear of and listen, I'm not trying to propagandize. I'm trying to share with a lot of asterisks, right? I'm saying I understand other people's point of view. I just see it differently. And I'm not trying to spread misuse. In fact, you could give me a polygraph. I've never once ever purposely said something that was incorrect that I knew to be incorrect. Because there's just no point in that, right? If you lie, you're going to get called out as a liar. You lose your integrity. So somebody says Chinese Communist Party desires. I'm not sure what that means, but it doesn't sound like you're being nice. Anyway, by the way, I've drastically changed the way that I communicate here on TikTok. So what I write in my descriptions especially is very, not very specific. And then, of course, the way I speak, I try to stay within the silly guidelines that we all talk about. So anyway, so that's what's going on. I did want to bring something up tonight. This was just on my mind earlier today. We don't have to shift gears too much if people want to stay on the conflict. But I was thinking today just how incredibly bonkers how life is right now in terms of just the way we're running. I was in the woods, but I was watching a road that was not too far off, watching the cars go by. And I'm thinking to myself, why are we doing all this shit? Like, what is the purpose of all this development and running around and staying busy and working jobs and making money and all? Like, what's the point of all this shit? Is that really what we're supposed to do? Is that really how we're wired to be? Really what we're doing is we're playing a role in a bigger machine that siphons money up to a very small number of people who make a ton of money. And yeah, there's some crumbs that make it down to the intermediate, managerial class. Some people probably make between 80 and 150 grand a year, but most people either make that or they make a lot more, right? So the question is, what was? I think about this a lot, by the way, and people think my family thinks I'm crazy, and you might think so too, but that's okay. I think it's interesting to talk about this. So we know that about 25,000 years ago, right, we were pretty much like any other being on the planet. We were vying to survive. We were trying to find stuff to eat. We were trying not to get eaten. We were in small groups of probably 25 to 50, maybe 100 humans. And we struggled, right? And this is before the discovery of fire, whenever that happened. But once we discovered fire, that was a little better, right? We could use that as a way to deter, predators, and we could also use it as a way to stay warm and even cook food. That was a big change, right? And so then you add into that agriculture. As we got more knowledgeable and had less time to be running from predators, we were able to figure out how to domesticate plants and animals. That was the big game changer. But was it a good game changer? You might say, what are you, crazy? Why would you not want to have enough food to feed your family? It's not that. It's just that if you look at the way nature works, it's brutal. But it does maintain a certain stasis in all of its brutality, which is the predator-prey relationship, disease, starvation, whatever it may be. But it just kind of works, right? Things stay regulated. And I don't want to suffer. I don't want to get, like a bacterial infection and then die because I don't have penicillin or whatever, right? Which we have now. I'm glad for all that. But the question is, at what cost? Right? So I didn't know this until I read about it from this really smart guy named Derek Jensen, he has a book called Endgame 1 and 2. It's massive. It's like 900 pages. It took me forever to read it. But what he basically says in there is excess calories created hierarchy. And it's hierarchy that causes all the problems in human society. Because back 25,000 years ago, we couldn't afford to hoard stuff, right? It was Karl Marx. It was from each according to their ability, to each according to their needs. So maybe somebody would gather, maybe somebody would hunt, or whatever it may be. And the people that gathered and hunting didn't come back and say, well, this is my pile in the corner, you all go find some. No, you shared shit, right? You had to. And sometimes you may have a hurt ankle, so someone shares with you. And then sometimes you're out there doing blah, 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 blah. Well, that's not how our society's set up, right? It's a big competition where people hoard the shit out of stuff. And we call those people wealthy people. But they're basically money hoarders, right? And they're kind of sociopathic about it. They may be perfectly friendly. To meet on the street, you probably have a nice conversation with them. But they're kind of ruthless in how they deal with money and the things they're willing to do to get it. So with hierarchy, people took more stuff. Like somebody would grow the grain, and then instead of just being equitable to everybody, like share, they would keep it, and they would have an advantage over other people, and they could use that advantage to their further benefit. And then they had more power within the hierarchy. If you're someone with a lot of grain or a lot of tomato, whatever you had, you could then influence whatever apparatus of decision makers you had because you had control over stuff, right? And that's just gotten out of control now. But what happened with the change of calories, just like any other species, if you have more food, you don't have to go chase more food. So you're not expending more energy. You can do other stuff. You can think, you can write, you can start to contemplate. And you can also procreate a lot more, right? You're not being chased by a woolly mammoth or a tiger. You're sitting in a little walled-in city with nothing to do but, do whatever work you're doing and then, what people do at home, right? And that caused population to explode. That was the big difference. And so if you look at a chart of human history, population-wise, pre-agriculture, we pretty much stayed the same at between 500 million and maybe 600, 700 million humans. That's what nature would allow, which sounds normal, right? It's a lot of people, but it's fit within the balance. And what happened was agriculture shifted that. And so therefore, humans went into this weird artificial thing of hierarchy, right? And it doesn't really exist in terms of the way, we're very unique in the way we organize in terms of our thinking and our ability to be in groups and our ability to, do certain things cognitively that, and maybe other beings can do it. They just don't do it in the crazy way that we do it. But anyway, so, and then we've seen what happened in history, right? So you start to have things like the Renaissance, and humans have more time to think and use their creativity, and all these different technologies like the wheel, and the way to grind like a mill to grind wheat into flour to make bread, and blah blah blah. Right? And then what? Well, we started to advance. We started to have these bigger societies, and the groups got bigger. There was more, more what do you call it? There's more fighting, right? People are going back and forth and trying to take somebody else's stuff over, right, to get more for them and less for them, and we're seeing that now, right? But if you follow the sequence of events, the worst of what back then the humans used to cooperate, right? We had to survive, and that's what a lot of other animals do. Now sometimes there's animals that eat the young, and there's hierarchy within those groups, but they generally have to work together to some extent to survive a lot of species, and we were one of them. But that all changed. Our very survival wasn't threatened per se, but the hierarchy really screwed stuff up in terms of how we think of each other and how we treat each other. And therefore, some people could act in a way that was basically sociopathic. Because in the other small group, if you started to act that way, you were gone. One way or the other, you were out, so you're gone. You're either banished or worse. But what happened? So certain people who really don't have much concern about accountability, because there was layers between them and the people that were holding them, and maybe some armies or police, right? They had force to protect their sociopathic desires. And then what happened? Nation states, whole groups of people decided collectively, however they led themselves, the king or the Senate or whatever they did, that they were going to go do stuff against other people. Maybe they thought threatened by them or whatever. So you had all this conflict, right? And just brutality, like horrible conflict. And people wanted to go conquest or spread their religion or whatever the hell it may be. And that has gotten bad. And what we're just a product of that extension. Now, what else changed, and this was the really big one, was the discovery of hydrocarbons. Because human beings were only able to grow so much with just agriculture, right? We couldn't grow too much more food without some sort of extra boost. But fertilizer that came from natural gas changed everything, as well as some technology that basically changed the height of the plants of wheat and other plants, some genetic engineering. And those big things changed everything again. So the explosion, look at the same chart. It's unbelievable if you look at the chart. There's different videos on YouTube that shows, look at the heartbeat of how the population was. It goes from 1400 to present. Go look for that. Those are fun videos to watch. But what happened is there was this massive explosion in population growth between 1850 and present. And that's when oil got discovered, right? The late 1800s. And that changed everything, because normally you had animal power and you had human power. That was the energy we were able to put into stuff. But fossil fuels, if you don't know, the energy density of oil, coal, and natural gas is unbelievable. And there's a great guy named Nate Hagens, Hagens. If you haven't studied Nate Hagens, check out Nate Hagens, because he talks about this stuff. I've learned a lot from Nate. So this completely changed the ability for us to get things done, to create much more power, much more oomph. I'll give you an example. And this is a great example to think about. So let's say your car conks out of gas. You're in the middle of Kansas, so it's flat. And you have to go, let's say, 30 miles to get to wherever you have to go to your hotel or wherever you're headed to your friend's house. So here's the question. So you're out of gas. There's no more gas. The car has to be pushed. There can't be a tow truck because the tow truck doesn't have gas. The gas station's closed down. So you got to get some people nearby to agree to push your car 30 miles, right? So what does it cost to have somebody work for an hour nowadays? Let's just say $20 to keep it simple. $20. And you have to have, let's say, 4 people at the minimum. So just say 4 people pushing your car, so you can go about 3 miles an hour down the road. So you're paying 4 people $20 an hour. That's $80 an hour. And then if you're getting 3 miles per hour, you have to go 30 miles. That's 10 miles or 10 times that $80. $800 to have human beings move your car, 1 gallon of gas worth of distance. Now you're bitching about gas prices. Let's say gas costs $3.50, $3, whatever it is. So would you rather pay $800 or $3? And that's why everything changed economically, because companies could get the same work for $800 for $3. That's how all this changed. Somebody says Mexicans are slightly cheaper. Now, come on now, that's not fair to say. But it did make me laugh, sorry. But no, Mexican people are amazing. They're usually very hardworking people. So that is the story, right? And so now we're in this weird sort of end stage technological, neo-digital, dystopia. And people are thinking that because we're messing up the planet by overproducing carbon from these combustibles, and some people think that's a scam. I don't think it's a scam. I think people are trying to use it to take advantage of it, but I don't think it's a scam. And also just all the displacement of other species. I mean, face it, If you don't know much about biodiversity, it is tanking fast. And the way you know that is just drive your car in the summer. It used to be when I was a kid, there'd be bugs everywhere. The car would just be covered. We'd go down to the eastern shore and you'd get back and you'd have to spend the whole day getting the stuff off the car. Now there's almost none of it, which just goes to show you the insect populations have been completely screwed up. And again, Mother Nature being what it is, it's the great balancer, right? And so I think there's this arrogance, and I think this is the other part of the problem. And this goes back probably post, I don't know how far back it goes, just say 20,000 years ago. Every creature wants to survive for their own reason, right? Survival is an instinct. You don't have to learn it. We just do it. Like pain, it's like you don't think about it. If somebody smacks you in the arm, it hurts. Or other things are pleasurable, right? You don't have to think about it. It just is what it is. Well, in terms of human beings, the different beliefs we have formed over time, but the most common belief that I've observed is human superiority. And you might be, what the hell are you talking about? Of course humans are superior. We're the top of the food chain. We're smart. We can build buildings. We can build, all this stuff. We have all this crazy imagination. Yeah, I don't disagree. We're gifted. But, try, getting in the ocean and going 4,000 miles with no sort of equipment and try to find your way. I can't do that. But a whale or a dolphin can do that because they have sonar and they can figure out how to traverse large distances using their innate capabilities. So we just happen to have some innate capabilities that other creatures don't have. That's it. But it doesn't mean we're better or worse. We're just a part of. But we've told ourselves this story, and this is where narratives come from. And this is where I believe, and again, I don't mean this disrespectfully to anybody. I just happen to view it a little differently, and please don't think that I don't have it all. I don't have it all figured out. I like to call myself confused, but I believe this is where religion comes from, because we don't know how things got started, right? I've never had anybody be able to explain to me, like, what's going on with that. I just can't get my head around it, and I don't know what happens when people die. I have no clue. I heard a lot of stories about this, that, or the other, depending upon which angle this you believe. But I believe that, again, something's hard to explain. You want to have some way of explaining it, right, to people who are just, can't get their head around it. So I think religions provide that. And I think they also talk about what happens later, so people aren't all worried about this stuff. And then it also keeps a certain set of control systems so that, these are the rules we follow. This is the way we comport ourselves. And I'm not saying that the ideas that are put forth aren't good, because in many cases, I think the tenets of these that tend to be similar about morality and stuff like that are actually good. They actually tend to cause less harm if you behave in a way that's within the confines of those edicts. But there are some control elements that I think are hard to deny. I'll tell you a bumper sticker that I saw. This kind of explains it. It says, religion is what keeps the poor from unaliving the rich. But you know what it said. And I thought that was really good. I thought that was excellent. Yeah, so, the bottom line is we're very smart, but we're almost too smart for our own good. And if you look what's been happening right now, it's a mess, right? So I was looking out today at the road going by, and I thought to myself, and I've thought this for a long time, are we human beings meant to be living this way? Like, is this a big aberration, or is this our destiny? To be in an industrialized society with fossil fuels and aviation and, microprocessor technology and the internet and all this stuff that's fascinating, right? Modern medical care. It does a lot of things that are good for human beings, right? A lot of people survive birth now than ever before. A lot of people live longer lives. A lot of people have better standards of living. Not everybody, but many do, and you count our lucky stars, right? But at what cost? And I know every species tries to, look out for itself. That's just nature, right? You try to stay alive and you want to survive. It's survival of the fittest, right? We know that whole story. But is this the way we were meant to survive? That's my question. I'll get to Imran Khan. Yeah, Pakistan, pretty messed up there. So the question is, and this is where I completely stopped worrying about stuff, right? I used to be somebody like, oh, we got to build out, we got to build out electric cars. We got to build out solar power. We got to do all this stuff. We got to do it. No, no. I stopped worrying about that because I realized that what drives all of this behavior, all of this diversion down the road, whatever road we were supposed to be on versus the one we're on, comes back to that mindset of superiority. And it creates an indifference to that which is around you such that you give yourself the right to look down on it and to exploit it. And it's very similar to what we're seeing from the Israeli leadership vis-a-vis Palestinians. Same exact thought process. The only difference is that this particular attitude happens to pervade most of human existence. And I'm not blaming anybody for feeling that way, by the way. It makes sense. Like, why wouldn't you think you're the top dog or whatever? But I think humans, unfortunately, are going to have to learn a very, very, very hard lesson. Because when you think you're the shit, you're usually just shit, right? If you believe that the Israelis are God's chosen people, you have a different point of view. I think they happen to be completely off their rocker. I don't think anybody's better than anybody else or chosen for this, that, or the other. We're just here. And I try to make that differentiation between what I call biophysical reality, which is literally, like we talk about what happened in the kibbutzim, there was a tank, and the tank fired around and it hit a house, right? That's what happened. And then you have what are called narratives or stories around what happened. So an Israeli spokesperson would say, we were engaging terrorists to protect ourselves and defend ourselves from these savages, right? That's what they would say, right? That's defending themselves. And somebody who's maybe on the H group side would say, these people are maniacs. They're using callous force. They're unaliving their own civilians to try to go after us. They're insane, right? Well, nothing different happened, but the story that people told themselves around what happened was totally different, and that's called narrative. And so humans are storytellers. That's how information was passed on for the longest time. And that's just in our nature to tell stories. And so right now we're getting different stories. And one of the stories we hear in America is America's the best country in the world, best ever. You know, it's a democracy. And freedom here is the best of anywhere. And we have the best standard of living because we're the moral righteous, and we're teaching the world to be more like us, right? That's what we hear. We say the Pledge of Allegiance, for God's sakes. And people don't think they're indoctrinated. I mean, are you kidding me? You don't think that's indoctrination? And then, of course, all the TV stuff we hear, we're supposed to be a good consumer, we're supposed to go to school, we're supposed to get a job, we're supposed to, pay our taxes, we're supposed to go through the same progression, everybody's supposed to get along and just do this. Well, who benefits from that, right? Not most people. In fact, ask somebody from the working poor class how they feel about this great system we have. And the system requires a lot of those people and fewer of the people who benefit from it, right? That's the system. So I just wonder if we're meant to be this way, because I don't think it makes a lot of people happy. I think what makes us feel good is connection with each other, working together to do things, because that's what we did before. We evolved to do that for most of our existence. And now we're in this weird space where we're competing for jobs and we're not helping. A lot of times we're totally separated. I'm separated from people almost all the time, which is not healthy. And I don't think that's good. And then I think we're told to support nation states. What nation state is? There's no nation state. These are totally constructs. I mean, try walking towards Canada, get to the edge of a forest, and you don't see this big wall that comes down saying Canada. You just walk across to the next set of trees, right? That's the earth. That's the landmass of North America. But humans have created this whole way of delineating stuff and having separate boundaries and borders and all this propaganda and stuff like that. It's really the worst of us if you think about it. And I don't know if we can ever cooperate because of the hierarchy I mentioned earlier and the tendencies within hierarchies for things to go askew with the way we're wired and what we do. So this crosses my mind a lot. I don't think we were meant to live this way. I think we were meant to live like every other animal on the planet that we call animals. We separate ourselves. Even that term is a separation. But there was a image that I have on my phone, and it shows two different pictures. One is a hierarchy showing a human man at the top of a pyramid, and then a woman just beneath the man being patriarchy, and then every other living being beneath that, like lions, tiger, whatever, all that stuff. And then I have another picture next to it that shows a circle, and it shows all the other beings, and it shows us just scattered within it, the man and the woman. Meaning that we're just a part of a bigger puzzle, right? We're just this smart ape that happens to be able to do a lot of cool shit when we're together. But it's almost like, what are we doing? Why are we doing all this stuff? Like, what's the point of all this? And I don't think anybody knows. And I think it just has an inertia of its own. It's kind of just barreling down the highway. No, everyone's like, well, should we do something? Well, I'm enjoying this too much, and it's just kind of going and going and going, and I don't know where it's going to go. You know, everyone always wants to think something's going to happen in their lifetime, like, oh, I'm calling for the end times, or that, I don't know. Probably the chances are I'm 56. It's probably going to happen. Whatever things happen that really change things, probably going to happen after I'm gone, and maybe for you too. But the question is, if you have kids and grandkids, you know, do you think we're leaving them, quote unquote, a better state of affairs or worse? And with nuclear weapons and potential conflict and, you know, the economic craziness that we see, and even the existence of all these factors in the first place. Like, why the hell do we have these problems to begin with? Why are these even dangers to ourselves? Why do we have it this way? It doesn't make any damn sense to me. We have weaponry that can destroy the entire biosphere for I don't know how many hundreds or thousands of years. That doesn't sound smart. It's crazy. So I think we're all just collectively insane and we're trying to make heads or tails of it every day. I don't always do the best job of it, quite frankly. You know, I worry sometimes that I'm just a little too, you know, just not loving it. And I decided, I kind of learned about some of this stuff when I was younger in my early 20s. I didn't know as much as I do now, but I'm kind of glad I decided I wasn't going to have kids because it just didn't feel right. And I would have loved to have done it for personal reasons. But, you know, someone says the rich will live, they got bunkers. Yeah, that's true. They've been building these really elaborate bunkers, these getaway places, or these places that are way up above high ground where they can only be reached by helicopter, or both. So they've kind of covered their bases, which whatever happens, like their insurance policy. But most of us, if any of these things happen, are going to be absolutely up the creek without a paddle, as they say. And in the meantime, let's hope that none of these things pop off that way. You know, let's hope that the conflict right now doesn't expand. You know, fingers crossed. And let's hope that we never do reach the day where either on purpose or by accident some of this stuff happens, because that'd be horrific, right? But it just doesn't. Something doesn't feel like it to add up. I don't know. Maybe I'm just crazy. It just doesn't feel right to me. I mean, it's cool, all this stuff we have. I have a computer right there. This is awesome. But there's something about standing in the grass with your bare feet, looking at a stream, and looking around and kind of going, this is right. This is sort of right. But the stream is poisoned by all the factories and chemicals and industrial stuff. And you wonder, how do the other beings, the birds and the fox and, you know, the ducks, how do they drink this shit? Right? We have water purifiers and other things to make the water better. They're just drinking the stuff that we're polluting, right? That makes me really sad. It really does. Now, somebody asked earlier about Imran Khan. So if you don't know who Imran Khan is a retired cricket player, very famous throughout the world of cricket, was an excellent player and got into politics in his nation state of Pakistan and was, you know, sabotaged unfairly by the Western powers, again, because he's somebody who cares about the population. And anytime you care about doing something for the benefit of your people and not the oligarchy and the security system, you're targeted. So if you don't know, he was just convicted of I guess it was called, I don't know if it's bribery or corruption or something like that, accepting gifts or something silly like that, which probably didn't happen. But he was ousted from being head of state through what was called a vote of no confidence, which was orchestrated by the West, like it always is. And then they had these charges they've trumped up against him. Not to use the word Trump, but that's kind of similar. And so now he's got a conviction for 14 years. I don't know. I don't even know if he's in prison right now. He may be. I think he may be. I'd have to look it up. But that's totally unfair. The guy didn't do anything wrong. They just don't like him. They don't want him because he doesn't serve the interests of the big club, so to speak. So I feel badly for the guy. His wife, too, I think, got charged with the same stuff. But I like leaders that look out for their people. You know, as much as Gaddafi was a weirdo, he looked out for his people to some extent. He was trying to form like a pan-Arab sort of money system that would have completely bypassed the US dollar for sales of oil and other resources in the region. So, and then Hillary Clinton has bragged about, you know, unaliving him. Yeah, So yeah, somebody mentioned JFK, and there's a lot of things that JFK messed with that he upset a lot of people on a lot of levels. I think that's what caused him to go away. But people have said that the group that the Israeli intelligence had a role in that, and it doesn't sound crazy to me. I don't have any confirmation of that, but somebody says yes, he's been in prison. Yeah, that sucks for him, Imran Khan. I think he's a good man. I really do. I think he means well. I think he's sincere, and that doesn't get you anywhere. You have to be diabolical and disgusting and sociopathic, and then you rise to the right. It's just like go find people that run corporations. These sort of, they have no sense of morality. They're just going to do it because they want to serve their families, and they can separate themselves from all the shit the company does and just look away for just because they get the benefits of it. Same thing with people on high levels of government who can separate themselves from the harm they're doing. I don't know. I can't get there. I have no idea how much time I have left, but I'm not going to be doing any of that shit with it. I can tell you that. Yep. I mean, I don't even know if JFK was that great. I just think he really tried to do some things that rubbed some people the wrong way. He upset he upset the CIA because he threatened to try to take them down. He upset through his brother some of the crime in the country because he was the what's it called, Attorney General, Bobby Kennedy at the time, his younger brother. He upset the Israelis because he wanted to do nuclear inspections and wanted to limit the ability of them to lobby as a domestic agent. He upset a lot of people. I don't know. It could have been listen, it's not always just one thing, right? It could have been several groups that are like, yeah, F this guy. And then whatever was concocted, and everybody's like, yeah, let's do that. But I don't think, in fairness, that it was an angry, weird communist who had ties to the Soviets through Cuba named Lee Harvey Oswald, who fired from a book depository. I mean, they must think the American public is just a bunch of morons. And if you really take a look at any of these major events, like 9/11 or other things, it's insulting, basically, I think. But we don't have to get into all that. Anyway, we haven't had any guests come up today. Let's have a guest come up. Somebody's got to want to talk. I'm kind of talked out after an hour. If you've ever done this before, it's not hard to do. You just start talking to your phone and look at the comments. But when you talk straight for an hour and a half, you want to just have a little less talking going on. I live in Dallas and drive by the main stuff. It makes no sense. Yeah, Dealey Plaza. If you don't know it, it's very small, by the way. You wouldn't even know it if you went by. It's like that was it. Just a little strip of land right there, right before you go onto the highway. And, he was, in my opinion, there's no doubt that there were people in front of the vehicle that did this from like sort of the right front. It's just indisputable with what happened. They're talking about this one bullet that came down and it went through Kennedy and then went into Governor Connolly and it bounced around. Come on. Are you kidding me? Yeah, by the way, that's a good point that someone just brought up, Pity. Ukraine, if you don't know this, they have a list of people that they put on there that they want to basically get rid of. And Tucker Carlson was added. Jackson Hinkle's on there. A guy named Gonzalo Lira was on there. He's now, unfortunately, he died in a Ukrainian prison. So, good evening, Hoda. How you doing? So, yeah, I mean, those people don't play. And by the way, listen, let's face it, the Ukrainian military is good. They're damn good. So it just goes to show you how good the Russians might be if they can overcome a force like Ukraine. And they've put up amazing fights. They've lost a lot of people. Somebody says, F Ukraine. I wouldn't say that. I would say that I know it's disappointing that there's so much corruption and that the leadership is co-opted by foreign powers and obviously they're corrupt. And that all this money has been laundered through the society and devastated, the civilians in the country. At least in the eastern half. It's been devastating, right? So the fact that the West has very cavalierly used this as a proxy to destabilize a potential enemy is disgusting. Somebody says, what's the question? Yeah, I would say exactly F Zelensky and F the neo-Yazis, that whole gang of crazy people. And by the way, if you watch the interview very carefully last night, Putin said that they're not done with that part of their mission. And that this is a big problem, not only in Ukraine, but elsewhere in Poland and throughout Europe, where these descendants of the collaborators with the Mustache Group They pretty much have allegiance to that ideology, which is obviously horrible. And so therefore, his mission, I think rightly so, is to thin out as much as he can of that crap so it doesn't regenerate. Because a lot of that's what drove this whole thing. If you don't know, I mean, they were the key members of the vanguard of the Ukrainian military that was firing artillery into these civilian areas and unaliving 14 or 15,000 people over 8 years, which was one of the big driving factors for this to happen. Not the only one. There's always other stuff, but yeah, Poroshenko made a statement one time. I don't know if you can look it up on YouTube, but he talks about that the kids in the west of Ukraine are going to go to school, that the ones in the east will sit in their basements shivering with nothing to eat and no heat. Like, he just hated these Russian-speaking Ukrainians. We were never told that in America, that there was this huge divide between, quote-unquote nationalistic Ukrainians that were these rabid neo-Yahtzee types. They told us that there couldn't be any Yahtzees because Zelensky is Jewish. That's what they said over and over again. Even Rachel Maddow and Joe Scarborough said that too. I heard them all say on MSNBC. MSNBC, by the way, is the worst. My family watches MSNBC. I am embarrassed what my family believes. And they think I'm a total nutcase. They literally think I've gone off the deep end like I'm some sort of right-wing conspiracy theorist. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? Yeah, Ukraine, if you don't know about Ukraine's history, no, the state is not led by an official, mustache man ideology. However, in the apparatus of the state, in the culture, in the West, this is in the western part of the state, as well as in the military, and even in their parliament, there's about 2.5% representation for this particular group, and they identify with a historic figure named Stepan Bandera, who's their national hero. And Bandera was a staunch Ukrainian nationalist, and during World War II, he collaborated with the Third Reich, the Yahtzees, and he unalived about 65,000 people in Ukraine. He was sort of the Ukrainian henchman, if you will, for what they did. And so look it up. Look up Bandera or Banderites. And if you remember, there was that power plant where they I forget the name of it right now, but all those Ukrainian soldiers were holed up for a while, and they finally came out and surrendered. And they took their shirts off as they processed these soldiers. And they had tattoos all over them of Stepan Bandera and iron crosses and pictures of the H group, pictures of the guy with the mustache and other symbols of the regalia of the Waffen, the SS, the Third Reich. That wasn't it was in Mariupol, but it was I forget the name of it. It was a steel plant, I think it was. I forget the name of it right now. But it'll come to me. I want to say Sevastopol or something like that, but maybe I got it wrong. Avastopol, that's it. Avastol, that's what it was. Thank you. Thank you for reminding me. Yeah, my brain can only hold so much data. Sometimes I just can't remember shit. But anyway, yeah, so go look at that up. It's documented. And so we were told in America that couldn't be the case. Zelensky's Jewish. That makes no sense, right? Ukraine is not the federal government in Ukraine doesn't have all the power. It's distributed, and a lot of it's influenced by these neo-Yahtzees. And what they say in many cases goes, these guys are threatening. They're very threatening people. You don't want to be on their bad side. They're like the muscle that will do all the ugly things you need them to do. But it's like the mob. When you're the friend, it's great. Like the cartel. If you're doing business, but as soon as you cross them, it's like, oh my, that's it. It's over. And so Zelensky must have been threatened by these people. I'm sure it happened. But they were able to do things that couldn't be controlled by the central government. And that's what stoked the problems in the eastern part of Ukraine. They hate Russians. They hate them with a passion. So do some research. Go read John Mearsheimer, or go watch some Scott Ritter or Colonel Douglas McGregor. You're not going to find it by Googling on Western media. That's all been sanitized from the internet, in case you didn't know, which is really sad to think of, that our system of information has been completely taken over by the national security state. Doesn't seem like it, but it's very hard to find accurate information on Ukraine. So, yeah, you'll find out if you go looking into it. Unfortunately, it's all part of the same playbook. It always has the same storyline. Some big public problem gets put out there and everybody gets angry and pissed off, and then this is what we got to go do because of it. But it's all a mirage. It's all a story. It's a cover story. Just like I think what happened on 10/7. I mean, whether it happened by accident or not, look what it's allowed the Israelis to do. Look how much faster they've been able to accomplish the things that I believe they've wanted to do. Who knows? But, look at it. It's been on steroids, dropping this, destroying that, under the guise of X, Y, and Z, right? So I have a whole library of stuff that I have referenced in my notes. Every time I go into an issue like this, anytime I find something valuable, I just slot it. So I got that for like 50 things in my phone, including Andrew Tate, by the way. A lot of people think I'm crazy when I criticize Andrew Tate. I'm like, I don't want to criticize Andrew Tate. If you don't know who Andrew Tate is, people probably don't know. Does anybody here not know who Andrew Tate is? Can you please, if you don't know who Andrew Tate is, can you type a number 1? Because he says he's the most Googled guy in the world. But if you have no idea who Andrew Tate is, please type 1. Okay, we got Field of Daisies 1, Dirma. Okay, there's some people, okay. And by the way, he would be really upset if he saw this happening. So real quickly, Andrew Tate is a former kickboxer. He's from the UK, but he lives in Romania. He's got a brother named Tristan, his younger brother, by a couple of years. And Andrew Tate got in a lot of trouble because of how he talks about the way that he sees women. And not just that. I mean, it's way over the top. By the way, Ginger, I'll talk about that in a second. So I don't, like anybody, you never dislike everything about somebody. Usually there's always something they do that's positive, or a lot of things they do, whatever it may be. So in that regard, I appreciate Andrew on one issue, which I'll talk about. But so the way he and his brother made their money, if you don't know, he was dead broke. But he's the kind of guy, he was like a player. Like he could always meet girls, and before he got that like flair, that pizzazz, that machismo, that he was good at picking up girls. And beautiful women too. So he thought, how can I make money out of this? So what he did was he came up with this idea. And listen, it's a smart idea. It's morally disgusting, but it's smart in terms of just business. So what he decided to do was he was going to recruit women by purposely getting them to like him or love him by, having relations, if you will, and then telling the person that he loved her and they wanted to build a life together, and then getting her to do adult work on camera, saying that we got to do this for our future because we got to make money, whatever. And he did this for like 40 or 50 women over a period of time. And, that, by the way, if you don't know, just like the definition of G-side is a little bit, got some other elements to it, the definition of human trafficking that includes it. If you use coercion through, sex or through emotional, what do you want to call it, emotional, what's the right word I'm looking for? Where you sort of delude somebody, you lie to them and you tell them you love them, but you don't. It's called the lover boy method. It's listed in the methods of human trafficking. It's like what a pimp does. Pimp gets these girls to love him and he puts them out to pasture, with the horrible thing to do. And that's what Andrew Tate was doing, except the pasture was video camera, like webcam. And then what he did, and this is the worst part of it, I think, he would get these men that would fall in love with these girls who were doing the webcam work on like OnlyFans or whatever the hell it was, or Chatterbait or whatever the hell these things are. So the guys would fall in love with the girls. Then he would use the keyboard. He took the keyboards away from the models. The models would pretend they're typing, and it would be Andrew and some other people behind the scenes chatting with these men and telling them all the things that they thought a man would want to hear. So he's having these weird, actual conversations with men on the keyboard. It's a very strange story, but makes a ton of money, not only through the tips and the fees for the video for the girls, but then they start getting the men to want to try to meet these women. Men always have this idea, maybe she'll like me or whatever, maybe I can save her from whatever the hell it is. It's like a strip club, same idea. And the women take advantage of that and they just keep milking. So Andrew became the stripper, basically, and he was milking these guys relentlessly. He's like, I'm going to come visit you. And by the way, everything I'm telling you, he has said every single thing I'm saying to you, he has said directly multiple times on camera. This isn't something I'm making up or some third party. He brags about it. Everything I'm telling you, he's bragged, and way worse. I'm not going to get into the gory details. So what he does is starts having conversations with these poor men saying, hey, I want to come visit you. This is and the guy goes, oh yeah, let's do it. So she's like, but I need like money for the visa I have to get, and I need money for the transportation, and I have to have deposit money or they won't let me go, and to make sure I have enough money when I get there, I need about $10,000. Can you send me 10 grand? And the guy's like lonely and maybe he has some money, so he's like, okay. So he sends the girl the 10 grand. Meanwhile, Andrew's taken 60% of all this money and given the girl 40. And he told her it was going to be 50-50. He lied to all these girls. But anyway, so all this money's coming in, big money from the women. He has like 40 girls working for him, all doing the same thing. They had one girl would be online 24 hours a day because they would use WhatsApp and Telegram, and other messaging apps with her photograph, but it would really be Andrew and his team, pretending to communicate. So she'd be doing this 24 hours a day, even though she was only working the cameras like 8, 10 hours a day. Pretty crazy scheme, right? Now they make a lot of money. I think they made like they made like $15 million doing this over the course of a few years, which is crazy. So they made a lot of money. But he deceived people. He lied to people. He brags about the fact that men were taking out loans against it. They had no money. They were basically borrowing money to pay these girls, and they just laugh at him. He had no concern. Somebody even said in a podcast, "Aren't you concerned that these men, their lives were ruined?" He's like, "For hell, of course not. I'm a stone cold hustler." Like, just total sociopath. Now, he's been charged with many of these crimes in Romania. And he spent some time in jail because the Romanian system is different than the United States. You can be held in what's called pretrial detention for, I think it's up to 6 months, and they were in for like 120 days or something like that. They were released initially on home detention, and then their lawyer since got it released. They have to stay in a certain county in Romania, but they can't leave the country. And they seized a lot of their property that was ill-gotten from these illegal activities, like their cars and shit. They still live in this little compound, and if you don't know who the Tates are, they're excellent at social media. And Tate refers to himself as the top G. I'm the top G, like to be a real like badass guy and get women and make all this money, all this bullshit, right? This fronting of ego and male masculinity. And he said all sorts of horrible things. He calls women, the B word, and he refers to them, just completely has no concern for their as a human being. Pretty bad stuff. And he's done it all the time. I mean, all his brother Tristan, they're not good guys. But they come across as like, we're for helping young men and we're for helping people have better, and they may do some good with that, I don't know. But they have a thing called Hustlers University, which is trying to teach young men how to aspire to be like them and to be a top G or whatever, a stone cold hustler. And so they charge kids $50 a month to be in this program. So that's $600 a year. And they say if you leave, you have no chance of being a good guy. You're going to be one of those wussies in the basement staying with your mother. So he guilts people into staying. And then he's got this other thing called the War Room, which is like the executive team of this bullshit system. And they pay $8,000 one-time fee to become a War Room member, which turns you into a super top G or whatever. And you're like, get to go to these special dinners with these jackasses who smoke cigars and wear all this fancy clothing. But they're just a bunch of, they're guys faking to be a stud, basically, trying to make themselves feel good and look good by becoming brothers with these great people. But it's all bullshit. And there's a great attorney on YouTube, if you don't know this guy. It's called Bruce Rivers Criminal Lawyer Reacts. So Bruce Rivers. Go check out Bruce Rivers. He's done like 5 videos about this. You're like, Chip, where do you get time to learn? I'm a weirdo. I watch a lot of content. But anyway, so I have all the videos, by the way, of every time he's spoken in public about this stored on this phone right here. I got all of them. So if somebody ever says to you, well, no, that's not true, I got the receipts for every single word of what I'm saying. And I have the criminal complaint from the Romanian government on my phone. I got all this stuff. Because I was having these conversations with people on Twitter, and they're like, oh no, you're just a hater. I'm like, dude, I'm not a hater. This is what the guy did. This is in his own words what he said he did. You don't even have to, he's incriminating himself. They're just going to play the recordings for the judge, and that's going to be it. He's in some big trouble. I think he might do like 10 years in prison, maybe more. Who knows? Maybe he'll flee the country. I don't know what's going to happen with the guy. And I don't hate the guy. Now, I will say this. Tucker Carlson flew over and did an interview with him and also his brother Tristan, and I thought the interview was pathetic. He let Andrew kind of just do all this bullshit. He says that he had girls making money on TikTok. They were on TikTok. I'm accused of helping women make money on TikTok. It's all just a big scam. The Matrix is like, he calls this whole international system of who's trying to oppress him the Matrix. The Matrix is trying to get me. Come on. Now, I call it the power structure. That does exist, I believe. But there's not a concerted effort to get Andrew Tate. Who could give a shit, right? He's just some guy calling himself the top G. Who cares? He's an idiot, in my opinion. But he'd probably kick my ass in a fight, so I probably shouldn't say that too loud. But anyway, I mean, he's just kind of like a cartoon character is how I see the guy. He's playing a role. He's getting men to give him money. He's playing this part. The social media, by the way, is incredible. So if you haven't seen his social media, I mean, it's amazing. I got to give him credit. It's the best I've ever seen, ever. Like times a million. So he's a genius in that regard. self-promotion, like Trump in a lot of ways. But he did have an interview with Piers Morgan, which was great. Tucker, by the way, was terrible. Tucker didn't ask him any hard questions. He gave a little bit of a baby string, and the guy just went with this whole bullshit dialogue I've been telling you about. But when Piers Morgan came over, they started talking about Israel-Palestine outside of his legal issues. And I got to give it credit. Andrew was on point with everything. He's like, what's happening to the Palestinians is horrific. Right on, everything was on point right on down the line. So I can't hate on the guy for that because he was completely on point. I mean, I can't say he said anything that was inaccurate. And he was totally vying for autonomy for Palestinians. Good for him. It doesn't change the other stuff, but nobody for me is written off for anything. Like the guy, like Charles Manson, for example, did horrible things. I still listen to his interviews just because people are interesting, right? And not everybody's 100% bad. They may be 98, but there's still that 2 it's worth listening to, I think. And I think that Andrew Tate is probably 90-10 in terms of being a good guy, being a bad guy, 90 being bad. And I feel sorry for the women he's hurt. He's exploited a lot of women, and he's physically assaulted a lot of women too. That's on tape, by the way, too, of him verbally demeaning. And plus, the other thing he did was, I didn't tell you this, he would have women come stay with him, and then he would make sure they had no money. So they couldn't leave and go on their own. They weren't allowed to go to a meal or go to town without him there or one of his friends to chaperone her. It's this weird kind of thing where he controlled everything. And so that's what they're getting him for. It's the control, the manipulation, the I love you, like using love and relationship promises as a way to control somebody and psychologically torture them. It's a weird set of charges, but it's illegal. And they did it in what's called ongoing form. So it's not like you're getting a one-off, like just one crime. It's like a collection of crimes that go into this one big enterprise, which is a way higher charge. You go to Bruce Rivers on YouTube, write his name down or whatever, Bruce Rivers, and he does very detailed breakdowns of these different parts of the case as well as the videos that Andrew's had and kind of incriminates him. And he makes fun of the guy too. I mean, like I said, Andrew's a caricature. I even believe, and I don't have proof of this, but I'll tell you a story. Andrew was at a UFC event, and in the hotel before they went to the event, he met Joe Rogan. And Joe Rogan said, hey man, my phone's up in my room. I forgot to bring it down. Can I borrow your phone? I got to look something up on the web real quick about the schedule. He said, sure. So Andrew Tate hands Joe Rogan his phone. And when he opens up the web browser to use the web browser, it was a gay porn site. And Andrew grabbed the phone back real quick and was really embarrassed and tried. And Joe said, look, dude, whatever, man. I don't care. Because Joe's very liberal when it comes to that kind of stuff. So, but that's just interesting that he plays this really hardcore womanizer. And then he's this closeted, whatever. I don't give a shit. But it's just interesting if you juxtapose that with his masculinity and all the stuff that he puts out to his followers. So he's been kicked off of, by the way, I think every platform you can. He probably has a Discord server or some other means of communicating with his people, or maybe a website, I guess. topg.com or whatever the hell it is. You can probably Google him and find him. But listen, he's an interesting guy. He's at one point he was probably the most searched for guy on the planet because of all the controversy and his whole shtick. And yeah, he made a ton of money. Let's face it, people who are younger aspire to have this glamorous life. And if somebody is showing them a path to at least what they believe to be, they're going to listen. And that's what this guy did. He's smart. He took advantage of the greed and aspiration of younger people feeling demasculated by this modern woke society and coupled it with aspirations for wealth and had this whole program. I mean, the guy's smart to do that, but he's not doing it because he really gives a shit about these people. He's doing it because he wants to make money off these people. He's a total charlatan, in my opinion. Now, if there is part of his program that can help somebody younger develop more discipline or go to the gym, good. That's good. Because they say you have to have your body in shape, your mind's got to be good. I agree with all that. But it's all the other stuff, the toxic masculinity. And by the way, they teach a course. This is no shit. They sell a course on how to do what he talked about doing his whole life, which is to get these girls under this spell and put them on webcam and he teaches a course in how to do it. He calls it the PhD course, Pimpin' Hose Degree. That's what he calls it. I'm not kidding you. I know this sounds unbelievable, but this is true. And so other people have done the same thing and they've gotten in criminal trouble for doing it. It's unbelievable. He's not married. He does. I think he has several children by different women. I don't know exactly who. He doesn't really talk much about that publicly. In fact, he got that question asked to him by Piers Morgan, and he said he wasn't going to answer it, but he did say he had children. So I don't know. Listen, I find it very entertaining. I'm not trying to rag on the guy because listen, he has a like a hustle. He's been able to hustle his way to make a lot of money by swindling people. Now I don't like to do that. Like that's not my way of doing things, but it's kind of just he got away with it for a while, and we'll see what happens with his case. He's got a lot of money, so maybe he'll be able to use that. But he also talked about that. They put him in jail. This is how arrogant this guy is. They put him in a Romanian jail, I told you, for about 120 days. Well, they have everything recorded in the jail. The phone calls are recorded, the rooms are recorded. You have no privacy. And he's caught on tape talking to his brother about trying to pay off a judge to get out from under these charges. I mean, the guy is a complete arrogant moron. But some people love him and they'll defend him to the death because he's the top G, right? And they want to be like the top G. And they think everyone's a hater. Oh, they're just hating on you. That's the Matrix hating on you. Okay. Maybe we have maybe, oh my God, it's Andrew Tate. No, I'm just kidding. It's Brenda. But that would be funny as hell if Andrew Tate came on. I would be loving every minute.
Hello.
Uh, I'm entertaining myself. Hey, Brenda.
Hi, Chip. Good evening.
So I just have to laugh about that. That guy just cracks me up so bad.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan. I actually did want to talk about something related to Andrew Tate that has just been like a theme in, just everything that's been going on, everything that's been coming to light, and that just I've
Yeah.
been really thinking about why it irks me so much. All the talk about all the grapings and, all the mass grapings, all the things that they claim that the H group has done, and, I've been really thinking about like, why does it bother me so much? Because, as obviously as a woman, and I know most women, when all the statistics is that like 1 in 4 women will be raped. And I would dare to say that that number, in our lifetime is a lot higher. I would say that most women,
You said 1 in 4?
1 in 4. Yeah.
Damn, that's a lot.
It's a lot. I think it's more, honestly.
Wow.
Um, because I mean, in my experience, I have been, I think almost every single woman that I've ever had a conversation about has been in some way or, and it's not even to that degree. There's different degrees of it, right? And then there's like
Yeah,
microaggressions and just things that happen almost on a daily basis. And
yeah,
um, so this is a very common thing in the life of most women.
yeah.
And so I've really been thinking about, it's like, why is it such a common thing? It's because it happens to most women. And who are the people who do this to us most of the times is people that we know. And if this happens to most women, that means that all of us women live in countries where most of the men are going to, at some point in their life, whether it's like explicit, whether it's aggressive, sometimes it's just forceful. It's just there's very varying degrees of it. And so the fact that that is used to appeal to women and to non-intersectional feminists is really, really insulting, because the fact that I looked up the statistics in the US, and every 2 minutes a woman is raped. Every 2 minutes. So imagine from the
Are
start
we
of
talking like a Bill Cosby thing where they're being like, or just some other way, or like the guy
chip.
jumping out of the trees, or some other way?
No, most women who are essayed by someone that they know. This is just how it happens. That is the least common form of essaying, is someone that you don't know. Most of the times it's someone that you know. And that's why it happens so often. And so even the statistics in which you're gonna have like this mass scraping or mass, that's just completely unheard of in real life. I mean, obviously it does happen in war zones, but just the logistics of it doesn't make sense. But the way that it's being used to appeal to us, as if all of us live in such pious countries that are such huge advocates for women, and like, our human rights, our women's rights, records are just so pious and so clean, that we have the gall to then use that. And like, I think this is something that more women, we need to be talking about this. They need to stop using that as a reason to then go and commit, these atrocities, because that is what they're doing. They're saying they're doing
Can
this
I
to some women, and therefore we are excused for doing these atrocities.
can I just, Brenda, can I make, there's a comment that I thought you might want to respond to. So there's
Mhm.
someone named Amir. I think somebody just banned him. But he said, women do the same thing to men. He said it like three times.
No, the statistics on that, like if you're gonna look that up, I think I've looked this up. I mean, this is something because it's, I've been essayed, lots of women who I've been close to have been essayed. This is, and most women know this. This is Amir a male name? I'm sorry, I'm ignorant in that.
What's
Um,
Amir? Yeah, that's
it's
women do
that's
the
just
same
not
for type
untrue.
of stuff.
No, that's just not untrue. The percentage of women who essay other women or other men is just, first of all, it doesn't even make sense because we you know as just the gender, we are quote unquote the weaker gender. How are we going to essay men on the same degree that men essay women? It's just it no, it's just untrue.
Yeah,
I would
people.
love to I
There's
would
someone
love to
else.
see the statistics on that. If Amir has like a link, a credible source
Yeah,
in which he talks, in which he they say that women
doesn't.
do that just as
Yeah,
much as
it
men.
doesn't sound. Yeah, what he's saying does not sound right. I kind of agree
No,
with
of
what you're
course
saying. I
not.
think.
Of course not.
Let me see.
It doesn't sound right because it's not right. So, well, that was my thing about that, is that I think, more women, we need to be a little bit more outraged that they're using that against us, because first of all, it doesn't make sense. There's, like you said, Chip, you've looked extensively for the proof of all these things, and so have I. A lot of us have. And I came on one of your lives the other day and I talked about how, a lot of Zionists come on here and try to try to say that, like, and like, no offense to you, Chip, you're amazing in what you do. I'm a huge fan. But you're not that good that you're going to convince this mass group of people to all of a sudden switch to a different mindset that we've all been, that most people have had the mindset of supporting, a homeland for Jews and whatnot for many, many years, because the programming and the propaganda has been that good. But, the veil is lifting and a lot of people are starting to wake up to that. So I think that's just, like, I want to encourage the women who are in here, and even the men also, especially the men, because the feminist movement, we all know, because a lot of men try to make it seem like the feminist movement is about hating on men. It is absolutely the opposite of that. Like, we need men to get on the same, to support us and to empower us, because the system has been set up in a way that depowers women. And so we need men just as much as they need us, because men are just as miserable in the society that men have established, because the patriarchy hurts men too. Men are hurting right now. I mean, I know, I don't know if people have heard about this, but like the male loneliness epidemic, that men are lonely because women no longer want to deal with their BS, because our society, our patriarchal society, has set standards for men that are just as unattainable as the standards that they have set up for women. So, just to all the men on here, patriarchy hurts you too. Everybody's hurting. And so, therefore, we all need to support the system that is hurting everybody, which is the patriarchy, because the patriarchy is what, causes all these wars. Um, so that was the thing that I wanted to say about that. I don't know if you have anything to respond back to that, because I did have one more point, and then I'll jump off. You're muted.
Yeah, I think I want to do want to make this one before you finish, and I think it'd be really cool to have a panel up one night of just females that can talk about their experiences and the patriarchy and how it affects their lives and how they see the world from their point of view. Because let's be honest, men dominate everything. It seems like for
Mm.
the most part. Maybe not Martha Stewart, but everybody else. I'd say everything else is maybe Oprah too, but everybody else is probably men. It's all men,
Those are
right?
not
So,
great women to have in leadership, in my opinion.
I agree with you. I agree.
Yep.
But yeah, so what else did you? So if you're somebody who wants to do that, either DM me or you can email me. My email's in my link in bio.
I
So
would love that, Chip. Yes.
that'd be cool.
Um,
That'd be
yeah, that sounds awesome. Thank you for even thinking of that idea.
yeah.
The other thing that I wanted to talk about was the thing you were talking about earlier about our purpose in life. These are topics that I just am fascinated by as well, because these are questions that I have had for a long time. And things
Yeah.
that I've been studying, and then just like, my personal and spiritual development throughout the years. Um, in which everything, and I think I've mentioned this in your lives a few times, like nothing is a coincidence. Everything, the way that it's been set up, our systems have been very, very intentional in how they are keeping us distracted. They are keeping us, basically just our basic needs are not being met. So one of the things, so I'm not a religious person, and if I did have to, although I did grow up Catholic, but if I had to associate myself with a specific religion, it would be more of the Eastern religions, probably
So,
Buddhism. Um,
yep.
so there are a lot of things that they do talk about though in the Abrahamic religions that obviously have been completely misinterpreted. A lot of information that has been left out. I think the Abrahamic religions take the Bible, the Torah, the old books, the ancient books. They take them as like very literal stories, and honestly, I don't even believe that the way that the books have been written now were even the original versions. But there is one thing I did want to mention that according to esoteric teachings, our purpose here is to reach enlightenment, to remember who we were before we jumped into this meat suit. Because and this is true because quantum mechanics proves that we are all energy, right? So we are and energy doesn't die. So we are energy in this like meat suit, and we come here forgetting who we really are to then reach that enlightenment through the lighting up of our chakras. And so it's not a coincidence that the seventh chakra is our crown chakra, which is in your forehead, which is this is why Jesus on the cross is wearing a crown of thorns, because it's the crown chakra. And so Christ consciousness is that enlightenment. And so in the Bible, it does, I don't remember specifically the verse, but I know that Jesus does talk about like he wants you to be him, which means Christ consciousness, which means enlightenment, which means remembering who you are, which means remembering that we are all like one consciousness. But you can't do that if you can't pay your rent. You can't do that if you're just worrying about, week to week, what are you going to feed your children? And that is very intentional. And that's the stuff that I think they keep us in that way so that we don't reach Christ consciousness, because people who reach Christ consciousness, people who are awake, are not easily controlled. And so that's why, like psychedelics were made illegal back in the day. The same thing with, the green plant medicine that we all love. So it's because it it allows you to tap into a consciousness that we can't tap into when we are like fueled by booze and by like poison food and by stress and worry. And so
Yeah.
I think that we were meant to be frolicking through meadows, like meadows and swimming in rivers and just foraging, fruits. And that's what we were meant to do, but we are forced into something else for the benefit of others. And so I do want to encourage others, because I know I've said that in other lives, because this is the only thing that I want to say to everybody is that we need to question everything. Everything that you've ever thought to be true, um, just question it, because all of our systems, everything, education, medicine, food, entertainment, everything is is very much set in the way that is. There was someone who said there that I just wanted to respond to a comment. Brent, someone said I need to travel more. I actually don't live in the US. I live in Brazil. And I've lived in about this is my eighth
Wow.
country. And I've been an expat since 2007. Or, you know what? I'm going to change that word because I hate that term. I've been an immigrant in other countries since 2007. And I think that's a huge contributor to why I think the way that I think. My perspective has changed. I lived in Myanmar right before the last war broke out, the
Yeah.
last genocide there. So yeah, I have been everywhere, and that is something that is definitely something that opens up your mind. If you have never left the United States, just do it, even if it's through books, if it's through documentaries of other places. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you, Tiff, for having me so much and for
Well,
letting
let
me
me let me keep you on the. I got to keep you on the line. You mind being on the line for a couple more seconds?
Sure, sure, sure.
Okay, so a couple comments came in that I wanted to hear your response to. I'm going to mention two of them and then we'll go over the other ones. So, Doc Turner says, "Let me be clear. Brenda does not speak for all women. She is also filibustering. What a rant." And then one more was, "Robert, you must repent and be born again through faith in Christ the only Lord." Any comments on either of those two?
Um, sure. I guess I don't speak for all women. That is absolutely true. I speak for my experiences and I speak to what I know. So, if me speaking about women being a sage triggered anyone, I do apologize because it is definitely a tough situation. And if you are in the lucky subset of women that have never experienced any form of that, then consider yourself absolutely just lucky because um I have been witness to, been victim of, and have heard just countless stories of just horrendous things that have happened. And I've also studied about this. So it's not, I'm not just talking out of my butt. This is stuff that I have researched, and I think if you don't really want to know the reality of what it's like for women, then you're never gonna know. And I think it's like, it does speak a lot about when people how people respond. And this is something that, we talk a lot, you talk a lot about with Zionist, is that, when you're not tied to your beliefs, or you're not tied to, like specific point of view, it doesn't become your identity. But if you're triggered by something, and that's always something as well that they teach a lot in the spirituality communities, like you have to lean into your trigger. So if I'm triggering you, that means I'm a reflection of you. That means there's something inside of you that is not quite right, and you should definitely lean into that and try to figure out what it is, because it's not me. We're all a reflection of each other.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, well, Brenda, thanks for coming up. And by the way, if you want to talk about Brenda
Oh,
like
can
that,
I respond about the born again thing?
of course,
Um,
of
I
course.
was baptized, did my communion, did my confirmation. I grew up in the Catholic Church. I went to confession every Saturday. Forced. This is not because I wanted to. Um, I was forced to go to confession every Saturday, did Sunday school every Sunday, church, the whole thing up until I was about 15 years old. And I realized that it was just not the place for me. I never felt comfortable in a church. I would go to confession, and as a kid, I would lie about sinning because I didn't know what to tell the priest. And that's just not. It just didn't make sense to me. When I left the Catholic religion, I sought out other religions because I think that's a natural progression for a lot of people. I sought out a lot of different religions. I even sought out Judaism, Islam, and I realized that none of them were for me. For reference, my father was very Catholic. My mom's actually a Jehovah's Witness now. As you can imagine, Chip, how you say that your family thinks you've gone off the deep end. So imagine how I sound talking to my Jehovah's Witness mother and Catholic father about about all of this stuff. So
Wow.
I studied a lot about religions, and I just, it's not for me. I respect anybody whose beliefs are very much set, and if it's good for
Yeah.
you, if it makes you happy, if it's something that truly brings light to your life, oh my gosh, I am so happy for you. But it's just not for me. I have I don't need to be born again. But thank you. I appreciate concerns of others.
Yeah, I think it's because people want others to have the benefits that they feel they've gotten. I totally respect that too. But Brenda, I just want to say, I think you've been a very enjoyable person to listen to, and I hope to have a chance to do more of the same because I think you're a great guest, by the way.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Chip. I love this. This has been awesome. Thank you.
Yeah,
And
we
keep
can
up the amazing work. I'm a huge fan.
thank you very much. I will. Yeah, please email me. My email's in my bio at the very bottom. It says email me if you go through my link tree.
Okay, I will. Thank you, Chip. Good night.
Thanks, Brenda. From Brazil. Wow. Yeah, I've never been to Brazil. Never been to South America. Actually, that's not true. I went to Chile for a business school one time for about a week. That was great. Really enjoyed it. But I haven't been any place else in South America. I got to go travel more, man. I got to get out. Um, and speaking of getting out, I just want to let a couple people know a few things. I want to reiterate the schedule, but first I want to tell you that all these lives are recorded. So this recording will be up a little later tonight. I have one more to catch up on. I got all the rest of them up to date. So the way you can find them, to go onto my YouTube and my Rumble channels, And the way you can get to those is you can go through my link tree in my bio. It's just a little clickable link that takes you to a little page with all the things I got going on the internet. So pretty self-explanatory. If you've never heard of Rumble, it's just another competing company with a very similar, just like a YouTube, but from a different company. So some people are moving their content to Rumble because it has a little less, censorship or whatever you want to call it. So that's why you'll see a lot of people who are being badgered or demonetized on YouTube going over to Rumble. Anyway, I do these lives 6 days a week, every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, like tonight from 8 p.m. Eastern to 10 p.m. Eastern. And then every Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday from 12 noon until about 2 p.m., also Eastern time. And, in my link in bio, like I mentioned before, if you like my style, like Brenda gave me a nice compliment. Thank you, Brenda. If you want to support my work, I'm trying to do this full time. Right now I do a little trading, which is, break even basically. And if I make a little, give back a little bit, I'm still learning. So I kind of got to figure out a way to make an income just like everybody else here. And, it's funny. Somebody accused me of talking about Israel-Palestine for money. Like, you're doing this for money. Well, it is work. When you work 15, 20, 25 hours a week on anything, it's work, right? So in that regard, if you go to your job, does somebody say, are you doing that for money? You're like, yeah, of course I am. So we all have to cover bills. So if you want to help out, there's a couple ways to do that. There's a $5 Patreon. I'm not looking to ask for big money, but if you want to help out, great. I'd love to have your help. I'd appreciate it. But if you're not in the place you can do it, please don't. I don't want to be asking people for their last dollar. But also, I just want to mention this, that I would like to do panels. Like we could do one on women's issues, on the patriarchy. We can do one on religion, which would be really cool. Maybe have somebody from Islam, have somebody from Christianity, have somebody from Buddhism, have somebody from Judaism, and just have a conversation that's very, hopefully civil and interesting for people to learn more about, like, what drives someone to believe what they believe, what good does it bring to their life, how is it that they're right and everyone else isn't, or whatever. I'm always curious to hear those things, because I think that's fascinating. And then we can talk about some other conflicts. I've been criticized for talking too much about Israel-Palestine, but it seems to be on everybody's mind, which is why I give it the attention I do. But if you want to come up and talk about the Congo one night, we can talk about the Congo. You want to talk about what happens in South Sudan, we can talk about that. You want to talk about what's going on in some of these more remote places, like what's happening in Mongolia. There's all sorts of things in the world that are going on in addition to this. Syria is a whole other interesting issue to talk about, which I think the Western press does a terrible job of. Anyway, there's no shortage of stuff around the world. We can talk about Azerbaijan and Armenia. Happy to talk about any of these issues, but, just got to figure out who wants to hear them, because I don't know what you all want to hear. I got to have you tell me. I'm happy to talk. And by the way, if you have a suggestion for the show, you want to have something covered that I haven't mentioned or some other idea, you can email me, or you can DM me if you follow me here on TikTok, because I'm always open to it. I find all these issues fascinating, but other stuff too. We can talk about, current events. We can talk about food. We can talk about whatever you want to talk about. I enjoy talking about pretty much anything. So I will be back tomorrow at noon. For those of you who want to check it out, I'll be here. I usually come up with something to talk about, or we go through comments, so we'll figure it out then. But I never have an agenda, by the way. I just do this, like, it just goes where it goes. So tonight it went to Andrew Tate and also the world being so sort of strange. So it is what it is. You never know what you're going to get, and that's part of the fun, right? So thanks for being here, everybody. I really appreciate you being here, by the way. I really enjoy the audience. Thanks for all your questions. I will see you all tomorrow or soon enough. Thank you.